Hello, this is Ron Paul with your weekly message for August 27th. As we enter the fall political season, we will hear a great deal of rhetoric from both major political parties and their many candidates for office. It's important for us to remember, however, that words can be made meaningless by misuse or overuse. And when we as citizens allow politicians to obscure the truth by distorting words, we diminish ourselves and our nation. For example, we've all heard politicians use the words democracy and freedom countless times. They are used interchangeably in modern political discourse, yet their true meanings are very different. They have become what George Orwell termed meaningless words. Words like freedom, democracy, and justice, Orwell explained, have been abused for so long that their original meanings have been eviscerated. In Orwell's view, such words were often used in a consciously dishonest way. Without precise meanings behind words, politicians and elites can obscure reality and conditions people to reflexively associate certain words with positive or negative perceptions. In other words, unpleasant facts can be hidden behind purposely meaningless language. As just one example, Americans have been conditioned to accept the word democracy as a synonym for freedom. Thus, we are conditioned to believe that democracy is always and everywhere benevolent. The problem is that democracy is not freedom. Democracy is simply majoritarianism, which is inherently incompatible with freedom and ignores the minority. It makes rights relevant. While our Constitution certainly features certain democratic mechanisms, it also features inherently undemocratic mechanisms like the First Amendment and the Electoral College. America is a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Yet we've been bombarded with the meaningless word democracy for so long that few Americans understand the difference. If we intend to use the word freedom in an honest way, we should have the simple integrity to give it real meaning. Freedom is living without government coercion. So when a politician talks about freedom or liberty, regardless of the issue being discussed, ask yourself whether he is advocating more government force or less. The words liberal and conservative have also been abused. Liberalism, which once stood for civil, political, and economic liberties, has become a synonym for omnipotent, coercive government. Liberalism has been redefined to mean liberation from material wants, always via a large and benevolent government that exists to create equality on earth. Conservatism, meanwhile, once meant respect for tradition and distrust of active government. But in recent decades, conservatism has been redefined as support for big government grandiosity via military adventurism, corporatism, and inflationary monetary policy. The modern political right has redefined conservatism into support for an all-powerful central state, provided that the state furthers supposedly benevolent goals. Orwell certainly was right about the use of meaningless words in politics. Our task, therefore, is to reclaim our language and reclaim our liberties. If we hope to remain free, we must cut through the fog and attach concrete meanings to the words politicians use to deceive us. Thanks for calling. A new update is placed on this number, 888-322-1414, every Monday. The written text can be found at www.house.gov/Paul under the heading Texas Straight Talk. Thanks for calling.
Where Ron Paul is right now. Congressman, good to have you.
Thank you, Neil. Good to be with you.
How important is this state for you?
Well, it's very important, but it's not do or die. You know, we expect to pick up some delegates as we have continued to do so, and we'll continue on.
You know, it's interesting. It is a proportional vote, and along the way,
right.
A proportional vote, even if you're second or third, certainly nothing wrong with that. You've been very, very consistent. You could amass quite a few delegates, whether or not you get the nomination, and certainly have a powerful voice. I know you obviously want that nomination, but let me ask you about this process and the extremes. You've seen the leaders go up and down. Now Iowa's been recertified to show Santorum won and not Romney. South Carolina, where Romney was winning, he might lose. What's going on within your party?
Well, I don't think the message is very clear. I have a very clear message, but I'm challenging the status quo. The rest of the candidates are part of the status quo, and nobody seems to be happy because they don't see what difference they're going to make. So their numbers come and go, but if you look at ours, you know, there was one time, not too many months ago, they knew that we had a significant group of people that were interested in what I was doing and having a precise definition of what government should be doing. But the ceiling was always 8 or 9%, you know, yeah, he's doing okay, but there's a ceiling. But now the ceiling shifted to about 17 or 18%. Now they're conceding that, you know, it's over 20%. And if you include independents and Democrats, our percentages are much better. You know, not too long ago there was a poll done where I was up against Obama, and I was equal to Romney in that. So
does it
we have
bug
a lot
you,
of support from
Congressman?
independents
I mean,
and Democrats.
You've been a remarkable phenomenon, but I always think you're like a sort of a thin Rodney Dangerfield. You don't get any respect. Does that bug you?
Well, I think a lot of people think that. Certainly Jon Stewart thinks so. You know, this whole idea. I mean, if you look, somebody told me, you know, from this last debate, I thought I did rather well. And they went down the number of times they mentioned the other three candidates in the review of the debate. And it was, you know, like 80, 90 times, depending on which it was. I was mentioned one time in all the discussion of the debate after it was over.
Right.
Now, you might argue I didn't win, or some people argue that I did.
You had the juice.
But it deserved more than one mention on all the stations. Somebody went and added these all up.
Thank you, Congressman.
So what's going on here? You're in this media business. I'd like to know exactly how that comes about.
Steve, thanks so much. The Republican National Convention kicks off in 4 days in Tampa. And just in time for the convention, an entire state's delegates are replaced by the RNC. It's a story that we've been following for 6 months. Tonight, Ben has the reality check that you won't see anywhere else.
Only a few days before the Republican Party holds its convention in Tampa. We've been following the delegate process for months, almost to the point of exhaustion, and yet no one else will do it. For months, we've also told you how the RNC just won't follow its own rules. Well, now that we're days away, the final attempts to control every aspect of that convention have fallen into place. The biggest fear for the RNC is that the appearance at the convention will be that 100% of the delegates don't want Mitt Romney. The only problem is they don't. Whether you like them or not, almost 20% of the delegates who will be in Tampa next week don't support Romney. Nearly 20% support Congressman Ron Paul, others support Rick Santorum, and still others Newt Gingrich. But the delegates who support Santorum or Gingrich have no ability to cause problems because of the RNC's 5-state rule. You see, under that rule, a delegate must have a plurality of delegates from 5 states in order to have their name nominated from the convention floor. As I've told you, unlike Gingrich and Santorum, Congressman Paul has that plurality. The majority of delegates in Maine, Minnesota, Nevada, Iowa, and Virginia are Paul supporters. He also had a majority in Oregon and Louisiana, plus a large group of 17 delegates from Massachusetts. Now, as I've told you, the RNC for months has been stripping those delegates of their credentials. The Massachusetts 17, as they're called, removed. The entire Louisiana Liberty delegation removed. Oklahoma not seated because the RNC Rules Committee allowed the state to break its own rules. The same thing happened in Oregon. But even after continuously breaking their own rules and stripping so many states of these delegates, the RNC came up short. The 5-state rule was still a problem because a plurality of 5 states was still intact. Again, Maine, Minnesota, Iowa, Nevada, and Virginia. So what to do? Well, just change the rules. You see, this week, the RNC Rules Committee tried to take care of their 5-state problem by changing the 5-state rule. A motion was made in the Rules Committee to increase the number of states from 5 to 10. But the motion failed by 1 vote. What was changed, delegates must indicate in writing at least 1 hour before the vote who they intend to nominate. By the way, it was a Republican committeeman from Virginia who fought against that change, saying it was unfair to change the rule just to prevent Ron Paul's name from being placed into nomination after he'd already won 5 states. So that didn't work. Instead, the RNC decided to take another extraordinary step. In this case, the RNC decided to go back and reinstate some of those Liberty delegates, actually give them back their seats from states where they had stripped them of their credentials. The Massachusetts 17, this week, 11 of them were reinstated. In Louisiana, 27 of the 46 had been Liberty delegates. Well, the RNC this week reinstated 17 of them. That's good news, right? But if the RNC is going to give a little, it's also going to take a little, like the delegation from Maine. As of today, all but 5 of Maine's 48 delegates and alternates may not be seated. The RNC Committee on Contests is recommending to the full RNC complete invalidation of the Maine Convention and the decertification of the Maine delegation. The RNC is only planning to seat the state party chairman, the national committeeman, the national committeewoman, Governor Paul LePage, and his wife, Mrs. LePage. Rather than allowing Republicans in Maine, though, to choose the replacements, the Rules Committee is also recommending that the RNC break one more rule and simply appoint a new Maine delegation. So what you need to know? The delegates from Maine who were elected to those spots by voters in Maine are heading to Tampa no matter what the RNC says, and they say they're going to fight for those spots. But the bigger issue here, again, why have rules if you don't follow them? Why does the RNC even have a 5-state rule if a candidate gets 5 states and then they want to change it to a 10-state rule? And then when that doesn't work, they just remove delegates, an entire state's worth of delegates, and replace them with people who will do what they say. Because at the end of the day, that's all that either party really seems to be interested in. And that is Reality Check.
If you would like to make your voice heard on this story, you can head over to Ben's Facebook page. You can find it by searching Ben Swan, WXIX.
Congressman Paul, a question for one of your colleagues on stage.
My question is for Senator McCain. This is an economic question that I want to ask. It has to do with the President's Working Group on Financial Markets. I'd like to know what your opinion is of this and whether you would keep it in place, what their role would be, if you would get rid of this group. And if you kept the group, would you make sure we would see some sunlight and know what they're doing and how they're being involved in our markets?
Well, obviously, we'd like to see more sunshine. But I, as president, as every other president, rely primarily on my Secretary of the Treasury, on my Council of Economic Advisors, on the head of that. I would rely on a circle that I have had developed over many years of people like Jack Kemp, Phil Graham, Warren Rudman, Pete Peterson, and the Concord Group. I have a process of leadership, Ron, that is sort of an inclusive one that I have developed, a circle of acquaintances and people that are supporters and friends of mine who I've worked with for many, many years.
So you'd get rid of this
remember group? Back in 1982 when Phil Graham and Warren Rudman and Graham Latta and all of those people got the first real tax cuts done, the first real restraints in taxes. I was there. You were there. And I rely on those people to a much larger degree than any, quote, formal organization, although the Secretary of Treasury is obviously one of the key and important posts that I would have.
Speaker Gingrich caused something of a stir overnight in the Middle East with comments he made in an interview with the Jewish channel in which he called the Palestinians an invented people. And I just wondered, Congressman Paul, if I can start with you. Do you agree with that characterization that the Palestinians are an invented people?
No, I don't agree with that, and that's just stirring up trouble. And I believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy. I don't think we should get in the middle of these squabbles, but to go out of our way to say that so-and-so is not a real people. Technically and historically, yes, under the Ottoman Empire, the Palestinians didn't have a state, but neither did Israel have a state then, too. But this is how we get involved in so many messes, and I think it just fails on the side of practicing a little bit of diplomacy, getting ourselves into trouble, mentioning things that are unnecessary. The people in those regions should be dealing with these problems. We shouldn't be dealing with these things, but historically, under the Ottoman Empire, that is technically correct.
But to make these decisions and deciding what the settlement is going to be should be the people that are involved. This idea that we can be the policemen of the world and settle all these disputes, I mean, soon we'll have to quit because we're flat out broke, but we cannot continue to get into these issues like this and getting ourselves into more trouble.
Speaker Gingrich, as I said, this has caused
Freedom of choice, says presidential candidate Ron Paul, shouldn't just be restricted to choices he approves of. He opposes things like prostitution and drug use, but says the federal government has no business trying to stop adults from doing them. You would legalize marijuana, cocaine, heroin?
I would get the government out of regulating all those substances, and I would allow the states to deal with problems, whether children should have them, whether children can buy cigarettes and alcohol or hard drugs, marijuana, and different states would probably do different things. The first federal law against marijuana was 1938, and they did it through high taxation because they knew they didn't have authority to say that you're not allowed to smoke marijuana. Today, it's gone berserk. The federal government comes in and overrules a state that has legalized marijuana to be used for very sick people, AIDS and cancer, and they're getting some help. The federal government comes in, puts people in prison that are sick because they're using it for medical reasons, and they've never committed a violent crime. That's how absurd the war on drugs has become.
Alcohol prohibition led to more crime. You
Absolutely.
argue that even heroin could be legal if some state decided? Wouldn't?
I think under our system of government that would be the case. But if you ask the people who are against it, if a state did that, would you use it? They say, oh no, I wouldn't use it. It's always there's other people that might use it, so I have to take care of them and prevent them from doing harm to themselves.
What about that? Is that a role for government?
No, I don't believe so. I think the government's role should not be involved in personal habits. I believe those rules should protect children who are below the age of making good judgment. So I have no problem with state laws that would protect children from the use of these drugs. But under the Constitution, the president and the federal government wouldn't have a say in it.
Homosexuality. Should gays be allowed to marry?
Sure.
If the state says we believe in this?
Sure, they can do whatever they want, and they can call it whatever they want, just so they don't expect to impose their relationship on somebody else. They can't make me personally accept what they do, but they can, gay couples can do whatever they want. Matter of fact, I'd like to see all governments out of the marriage question. I don't think it's a state function. I think it's a religious function. And there was a time when only churches dealt with, marriage. And they determined what it was. But 100 years or so ago, for health reasons, they claimed that the state would protect us if we knew more about our spouses and we did health testing and you had to get a license to get married. And I don't agree with that.
Prostitution.
I think when you defend freedom, you defend freedom of choice, and you can't be picking and choosing how people use those freedoms. So if they do things that you don't like and you might find morally repugnant, I, as an individual, I don't make that judgment. So I don't believe government can legislate virtue. I can reject it personally and preach against it, whether it's drugs or prostitution, but my solution comes from my personal behavior with myself and how I raise my children. But whether it's personal behavior or economic behavior, I want people to have freedom of choice.
Adults, you seem to be saying, own their own bodies, and if a woman wants to rent hers out, that's her business. If she wants or he wants to smoke crack?
Yeah, I think it's tragic, and matter of fact, I think the war on drugs, which has caused the price of drugs to go up, and we treat them as criminals rather than sick people, we have pushed a lot of people into prostitution. So prostitution is related to the mistakes we've made in the drug war. But I think people make bad choices in religion and philosophy, but we don't regulate their thinking or their religious beliefs that they're not harming other people. That's why I defend this position that individuals should protect themselves. Governments can't protect individuals from themselves. It's just impossible. Otherwise, they become a tyrannical state.
time has come around to the point where the people are agreeing with much of what I've been saying for 30 years.
The master of persistence is Ron Paul.
I agree with Ron Paul.
I think the Patriot Act is unpatriotic because it undermines our liberty.
Be against the Patriot Act like Ron Paul is because part of the Patriot Act is they could look at your gun records. They could look at your library records. They don't even need a name or attached to a search warrant, and they don't even need probable cause. So I would think if you're someone who favors gun rights, you'd be very much against the Patriot Act. Ron Paul is exactly right on this.
They were crooked then, and they're crooked now. When Ron Paul talks about auditing the Fed, it's about damn time.
I found over the last 3 years that I'm finding myself agreeing with almost everything that Ron Paul says, which is either scaring me or perhaps a sign that he wasn't as nutty all along as I thought.
I have to agree with Ron Paul.
Twitterverse will be so excited that Donna Brazile agrees with Ron Paul. That will be a big...
I agree with him on a lot.
You know what I'm digging is that Ron Paul guy. I just happened to hear the guy talk, and everything he said I kind of agreed with.
I just want to say, having campaigned during the last presidential election, you had the most enthusiastic supporters of anybody I ever saw.
I'd love to hear that.
Well, I mean, my goodness, everywhere I went, they were literally running down highways holding your signs. Now, I've never had a chance to tell you that, but your message obviously resonated with a lot of people.
Thank you.
Ron Paul said Monday that President Obama's targeted killing of Eleanor Locke might be an impeachable offense. He said impeachment would be possible, but he wants to know more about how the administration flouted the law. Ron Paul called the killing a movement toward tyranny. 100% right. He's 100% right.
Who do you like? Who don't you like?
Well, there's only one person that I like at all, and that's Ron Paul. He's the only one that I agree with, that we need to audit the Federal Reserve, that we need to shut down these wars and bring our young men and women home immediately, shut down all these bases throughout the world, and let's start concentrating on jobs at home and job creation here. Can you imagine the money we could put forward to our infrastructure?
Ron Paul is the only guy I trust. And like you heard, Alex, you know, I said if I had one wish, you know, if they give me one wish, I'd like to line up all the members of Congress and have Ron Paul walk with me down the line and say, okay, which one's corrupted? Which one's corrupted? And the ones he says points to as corrupted, I'm going to choke them unconscious and stick them into a pile.
Ron Paul was right about everything he said about the time bomb with the economy and the banks.
He sure as heck was.
And I mean, you're supporting Ron Paul now.
Ron Paul, who I believe is one of the more honest men in Washington, I say, Ron, point out the honest politicians and the dishonest politicians.
I don't know that.
And as we're walking down the line, he say he's honest, he's honest. Now he's dishonest. I'd walk up to him and I'd say, you're fired. And if he didn't move immediately, I'd choke him unconscious and drag him over to the pile.
Okay. I really get a kick out of Ron Paul. I really like a lot of what he says.
You had made a contribution in 2007 to
Ron
Paul.
I did.
You did?
I did. I like him.
Do you still like him?
I like what he says. I do. I like what he says. I think he's solid. I agree with just about everything he says. What can I tell you?
I'd vote for Ron Paul if I had to pick. I mean, Ron Paul is at least not a pander. He's sincere. He's got the right ideas about getting our troops home, and you know, I like Ron Paul.
Where they're kind of like Ron Paul, who kind of says, you know, you shouldn't tell people what they do in the privacy of their lives. The government shouldn't be entangling itself in foreign affairs, much as you've argued about Iraq. He would seem to be of your liking.
Yeah, I think I've always advocated if everybody just leave everybody alone instead of trying to manipulate everyone else's life. Ron Paul he's talking about fiscal responsibility. That certainly is something I like.
You got to hand it to Ron Paul. Whether you agree with everything that he says or not, at least he is one there in Congress trying to make our president stick to the law and understand that Congress does have a role to play in these foreign policy decisions that are made. And Ron Paul, I think, has hit the nail on the head when he's come out and said that Obama had better be careful when he interjects himself and our country in other nations' business.
As Ron Paul said, you have to let the market clear so it can recover.
Ron Paul is about to show the Republican presidential field what a serious fiscal reform plan looks like. He is going to propose $1 trillion in real spending cuts. He is going to propose immediately freezing spending. We have got to face, if we are serious about this, fooling around the margins on all this spending isn't going to get it done. A 2% tax cut here or a 3% tax variation over there, not going to fix what's wrong. Genuine, big spending cuts are the only thing that is going to bring us back.
My experience is the same as Congressman Dr. Paul's. I believe that once a patient's in the hospital, doctors don't think about it that way, and the hospital does not routinely discharge people who have brain tumors once they're admitted. We tend to take care of people once they're there.
You, sir, are looking more and more right every day. You have been ringing this bell for quite some time, and what do we do?
I agree now with Ron Paul more than I did in 2008, and we have a choice, and I think this is the choice that's going to happen to us. You can't live in this middle ground with our Constitution. You can't. You either embrace the Constitution or shed the Constitution. And Ron Paul is the closest to our founders.
If you had to choose a running mate, one of the people on the stage with you, who would you choose and why? 30 seconds down the row. Governor Johnson.
Sorry. Well, that would be the guy 3 down, Congressman Paul. And that would be the notion that this country is about liberty and freedom, and that right now we are facing an extraordinary crisis, that if we do not address it now, we're going to find ourselves in a monetary crisis that is going to leave us all with nothing.
Ron Paul's right about the debt. He's right about the deficit. He's right about spending. He's right about budgets. He's right about the Fed. He's right about a lot of things. Right about gold. He's been right about a lot of things.
Congressman Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
You know, I find myself defending you more and more. Let me give you 2 recent examples. First, I supported your $1 trillion plan to cut spending immediately. It's a great idea. You nearly bring us down immediately to a balanced budget. I like the idea to live within our means. I think otherwise the country's headed for bankruptcy. So I endorsed your idea. I like the idea. I think it's ambitious. I think it's bold. I think it would be good for the country.
Where are the people that say all of this stuff that the Fed is doing is socialism? Well, we are socializing and nationalizing.
Exactly. There was one, Ron Paul, but they drummed him out of the Republican Party. I mean, nobody would pay him any attention. He's the only guy that has the courage to speak the truth. Look at what he says on the Senate Banking Committee when he talks to Ben Bernanke and when he talked to Alan Greenspan all these years. He's talked about all this. He's warned about all this, but everybody has ignored him.
Is Ron Paul being ignored by the media? 97% of you said yes, he is.
Ron Paul makes a lot of sense, and more people ought to listen to him.
For 30 years, you've talked about inflation, tax, devaluation. In the campaign 3 years ago, some tried to laugh at you, but now I see editorials in major papers everywhere saying Ron Paul won't get the snub this time.
Who's the leading candidate for the Republicans for 2012?
I don't know. Has the New York Times picked him for us yet?
I don't know. I keep hearing...
He picked the last one.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't see the Times
No thoughts?
today.
No thoughts?
I think Ron Paul. The war will be over. And basically, I agreed with Ron Paul on everything.
Why do we have American forces in Germany? I think it's very legitimate, and Ron Paul does make a legitimate point to at least raise the question, are there a lot of places that we're still there out of habit, not because they strategically make sense? And I think you could, in fact, go through the system and raise those kind of questions.
I am thankful to Representative Ron Paul for his consistent and steady pressure on the Federal Reserve. And as chairman of the Subcommittee on Domestic Monetary Policy, he will have the oversight of the activities of the Federal Reserve, including the ability to require an audit of the Federal Reserve Bank.
The more the free market handles this and the more you deal with property rights and no subsidies to any form of energy, the easier this problem would be solved.
Governor Romney, where do you stand on this?
Congressman Paul was right on that. Innovation. And Congressman Paul, you're correct when it comes to allowing the states to compete with each other. That is the answer to this.
The only one that, to me, seems to have a firm grip on all of this is Ron Paul.
I supported Ron Paul, but he was the only guy that was actually saying anything that was truly different.
place. I enjoy this team. I hope we do.
Who do you support for president?
Ron Paul.
Why?
One, he represents the Constitution.
Oh, I like it. Right, I like it. America.
Thank you. Enjoy your time. Ron Paul.
He's a strong supporter of Campaign for Liberty and a strong supporter of Ron Paul and a friend to us all. Please join me in welcoming Vince Vaughn.
Very lucky to have a voice like his out there, and we need to have more out there that are like his. It is my great honor tonight to present to you Dr. Ron Paul.
What is interesting about Ron Paul is he has a solid and consistent following. I think it's right to call him more of a prophet than a power broker.
We're headed toward a national ID card. We're headed to being vassals or serfs of the state. And I've looked at the field of presidential candidates. There's only one guy who's outspoken against this kind of stuff, and it's Congressman Ron Paul. He's been against this idea of a national security state for a long time, and he's starting to look more and more attractive with each passing day.
My name is Hutton Gibson. I'm a veteran of World War II, and I intend to tell my 10 children and my 48 grandchildren that the only way we can save the country is to vote for Ron Paul.
And then Ron Paul, that's like a real dude who's breaking it down, you know, honestly.
Yeah, I'll vote for Ron Paul. Sure, I'll vote for Ron Paul.
I'd like you to comment on this. Is this completely off base, or is there something really to this? Every time we see the cost of living going up, that we indirectly are paying a tax.
Congressman, I couldn't agree with you more that inflation is a tax and that inflation currently is too high.
Congressman Paul got me really intrigued with the whole the Federal Reserve, and I've spent a substantial amount of time reading about and Currency Wars, the book by James Rickards. But Congressman Paul is the individual on the stage that got me most interested in a subject that I've found to be quite interesting and at the root of a lot of the problems that we have, and I thank you for that.
I always find the principle of leadership to be most interesting. And as I look at the people on the stage, each exhibits different qualities of leadership, and they've each exercised leadership in different ways. One of the things about Ron Paul that always amazes me is when I come to a debate like this, the only signs I see are the Ron Paul people out there in freezing temperatures are always there. He ignites an enthusiasm with a number of people that's very exciting.
I highly value our featured speaker tonight, Congressman Ron Paul. And I have known Ron for the 3 years that I have been in Congress. I've been just honored to know him, to get to know him better, to have conversations with him. He's invited me to be a part of his Thursday Liberty Luncheon. Every week we get together, we talk about monetary policy, and the foundation of all of our conversations is liberty and how we can get more liberty back into the hands of the people. He truly is who he says he is. He's an awesome man.
You are a Democrat. You are the former county chair of Belknap County. You abandoned your own party and became an independent. Why did you do this?
I want someone who will really challenge President Obama, and for me, that's Ron Paul.
Why do you, a Democrat and a former leader of Democrats, have you decided that Ron Paul is the president we need?
Because Ron Paul is very frank and honest. I saw him this week, Wednesday night in Portsmouth, and last night in Laconia. He's not an afraid person at all. He's not hedging his bets. He says what he believes.
I'm voting for Ron Paul for president. You should vote for Ron Paul for president.
America will thrive again when we have leadership, when we have a leader who embraces and extols the greatness of our founding documents, the greatness of capitalism, and the unlimited potential of free individuals. I think that leader is my father, Ron Paul, and I hope you will give him your consideration.
Now, to balance the scale, I'd like to talk about some things that bring us together. Things that point out our similarities instead of our differences. Because that's all you ever hear about in this country is our differences. That's all the media and the politicians are ever talking about, the things that separate us, things that make us different from one another. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They try to divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. You know, anything different, that's what they're going to talk about. Race, religion, ethnic and national background, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything you can do, keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank. You know how I describe the economic and social classes in this country? The upper class keeps all of the money, pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes, does all of the work. The poor are there just to scare the shit out of the middle class. Keep them showing up at those jobs. So stirring up the shit is something I like to do from time to time, but I also like to know that I can come back to these little things we have in common, little universal moments that we share separately, the things that make us the same. They're so small we hardly ever talk about them. Did you ever look at your watch? And then you don't know what time it is. And you have to look again. And you still don't know the time. So you look a third time and somebody says, "What time is it?" You say, "I don't know." Do you ever notice how sometimes all day Wednesday, you keep thinking it's Thursday? And it happens over and over all day long. And then the next day, you're all right again. Do you ever find yourself standing in one of the rooms in your house and you can't remember why you went in there? And two words float across your mind: Alzheimer's disease. You ever been talking to yourself and somebody comes in the room and you have to make believe you were singing? And you hope to God the other person really believes there's a song called "What Does She Think I Am?" Some kind of putz? Little experiences we've all had. You ever been sitting in a railroad train in a station and there's another train sitting right next to you and one of them starts to move and you can't tell which one it is? How about when you're out on a small boat on a windy day? You ever been out rocking back and forth for 3 or 4 hours trying to keep your balance? Rough seas, little boat. Then you get back into the shore and you're standing on the dock and you could swear there was something inside of you that was still out there rocking. Did you ever try to pick up a suitcase you thought was full, but it wasn't? And you go, "Doo?" And for just a split second you feel really strong. How about when you're looking through a chain link fence? Do you ever notice if you're just the right distance from a chain link fence, sometimes it seems to go, what is that? How do they do that? Do you ever try to tell somebody they have a little bit of dirt on their face? You can never get them to rub the right spot, can you? Say, "You got a little bit of dirt right here." They always go, "Where? Here?" And you just want to slap the bastard. Do you ever notice how awful your face looks in a mirror in a restroom that has fluorescent lights? Every cut, scrape, scratch, scar, scab, bruise, boil, bump, pimple, zip, wart, welt, and abscess you've had since birth all seem to come back at the same time. And all you can think of is, "I gotta get the fuck out of here!" Do you ever notice sometimes when you're walking with your arm around your date, one of you has to change the way you're walking? Men and women don't walk the same. One of them has to change. Either the man has to walk like this, or the woman has to walk like this. Joey, how are you? How about when you're going up a flight of stairs and you think there's one more step? And you go... And then you have to kind of keep doing that, you know? So people will think it's something you do all the time. I do this all the time. It's the third stage of syphilis. Same thing happens when you're going down the stairs. You could swear there was one more step. Holy shit. My hips are in my chest. When you drink grapefruit juice in the morning, do you go like this? I do too. Why do we drink it? It's like ice cream throat. You know when you've been eating ice cream too fast and you get that frozen spot in the back of your throat, but you can't do anything about it because you can't reach it to rub it? You just have to kind of wait for it to go away. And it does. Then what do? Eat more ice cream! What are we, fucking stupid? Did you ever fall asleep on a late afternoon and wake up after dark and you don't know what goddamn day it is? Like when you have your head on the pillow. Do you ever notice when you have your head on the pillow, if you close the bottom eye, the pillow is down there. Then if you switch eyes, the pillow moves up there. Whoa, holy shit, Dave, look at this. The mystery of the moving pillow. I think it's related to the chain link fence mystery myself. Do you ever have to sneeze while you're taking a piss? It's frightening, isn't it? It's frightening because actually you can't do it. It's physically impossible to sneeze while pissing. Your brain won't let it happen. Your brain says, stop pissing! We're going to sneeze now! Because your brain knows you might blow your asshole out.
Dr. Paul has a long history of saying things that are inaccurate and false. The fact is, I never asked for deferment. I was married with a child. It was never a question. My father was, in fact, serving in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta at the time he's referring to. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's like as a family to worry about your father getting killed, and I personally resent the kind of comments and aspersions he routinely makes without accurate information and then just slurs people with.
I need one quick follow-up. When I was drafting, I was married and had 2 kids, and I went.
I wasn't eligible for the draft. I wasn't eligible for the draft.
We turn now to a major eruption of fury at the Republican National Convention on Tuesday as the formal nomination process got underway. Part of Maine's delegation stormed off the floor in protest against a decision to strip away half of the state's Ron Paul delegates. Supportive members of other delegations rose to their feet and hollered their objections, angered by new rules that they say will make it harder for grassroots candidates to stand a chance in future elections. His ardent followers used seldom evoked state party rules to garner 20 of Maine's 24 spots.
The RNC responded by replacing 10 of them, enough to prevent Ron Paul from being nominated from the floor.
A question on the motion offered by the delegate from Kentucky. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
The decision caused an immediate uproar, but RNC Chair Reince Priebus was in no mood to take a roll call.
Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. We have to proceed with the order of business.
We sat here and objected. He said, are there any objections? We objected. And you know, it's like, why even ask the question at that point?
Maine got screwed of half their delegates, more than half actually. That's why their governor's not here today, because he said he wouldn't come down unless their delegates got seated. Half of them got taken away, and they were replaced by people that the Republican Party, the RNC picked.
Several members of the Maine delegation walked off the floor in protest after the convention decided to replace 10 of its 24 delegates.
It's a fraud! Convention is a farce! They snuck in there talking about we support our soldiers. They got rid of 7 of them on our delegation. 2 recently serving in Afghanistan and Iraq. How dare they? Shame on them! Shame on them!
The people of Maine should be respected. And those voters that put us here, they should be respected. This is a sham. I love every one of you guys, and I love all those people back home.
Others on the floor were equally outraged. Kevin Erickson is a delegate from Minnesota.
What this means is that the states will no longer retain the right under the new rules to elect their delegates and have them stand. A presumptive nominee will be able to unseat an entire state's delegates if they don't like who's on the slate. Giving a presidential candidate veto power over a state's delegation means that future conventions will not have a dissenting voice. We won't be able to bring motions and amendments to our platform. We won't be able to speak for people who believe differently. You're taking a broad tent and a grassroots party, and you're turning it into a dictatorship that'll be run by a few people with a lot of money. And average, ordinary people like myself will be out of luck and out of a voice.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. We need another chair. The ayes have it. The resolution's adopted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it.
The question is on the motion that the Honorable Paul Ryan be nominated by acclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
And I have to explain the cheers that we've been hearing. I had to turn around to see what was going on. It was Congressman Ron Paul entering the forum. He still has very much a role within this Republican Party.
Yeah, he is. I just saw him come through here, and as he went by me, there were a lot of young voters. They're the ones who really loved him, stopping him, taking pictures of him to tweet out. And he came in with his same smile that he's had, and he's become something of a cult hero in the party.
Let him speak! 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 Let him speak!
Madam Secretary, I am honored to lead the Republican Party in the Ocean State. It's the listing name, for the record, Rhode Island and the Providence Plantation.
You're not supposed to.
It's the home of delightful known such as the Greeting Miss USA. And then you know
That's our property. I'm sorry. That's my
I am pleased now to yield to the mayor of the city of Cranston.
You took the sign.
And our delegates to cast 4 votes for Ron Paul, and the overwhelming majority, 15 votes, to the next president of the United States, Mitt Romney.
Rhode Island, 15, Romney.
On behalf of the Georgia Republican voters, proudly give 72 of our delegate votes to the next president of the United States, Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. 3 votes for Romney.
Okay.
Well done. Whoever controlled the microphone did a great job.
And I'm proud to say that we are going to support the next president of the United States by casting 67 votes for Mitt Romney and 5 votes for Paul Ryan.
67. Pennsylvania, 67, Romney.
Iowa casts 22 votes for Ron Paul. And 6 votes for Mitt Romney.
Iowa, 6, Romney.
Minnesota, where we are very proud of our state Republican Party, which runs a fair convention with integrity. It casts 33 votes for Ron Paul. 1 vote for Senator Rick Santorum, and 6 votes for Governor Romney.
Minnesota, 6, Romney.
We proudly cast 17 votes for Congressman Ron Paul, 5 abstentions, and 5 for Romney.
Nevada, 5, Romney.
Nevada, 5, Romney.
I got to tell you, and I like your dad, you love your dad, but I like him a lot. I was pretty shocked to hear that they wouldn't even read from the podium how many votes Congressman Paul got.
Well, one of the interesting things was the crowd was reciting how many he got, so when they wouldn't announce it from the podium, you would hear an echo from the crowd of the Ron Paul supporters who were announcing his totals.
Why didn't they do that? This seems so petty and so ridiculous. I mean, your father worked hard in the Republican Party. He went through all the rules. I believe he didn't do anything illegal in getting those votes. He went through the process. This is the last time he's running for president of the United States. I just thought it was inappropriate to end his political career, if you will, on a note like this before his own party.
This is Ben Ginsberg, Republican lobbyist and lawyer. He was once on a list of Washington's most powerful but least famous people because he's a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He was the top lawyer for the George W. Bush presidential campaigns, including in the Florida recount in 2000. Here's the actor Bob Balaban playing Ben Ginsberg in the HBO movie about the recount in Florida. Ben Ginsberg worked for Minnesota Republican Norm Coleman when Coleman unsuccessfully challenged his loss to Senator Al Franken. Ben Ginsberg has worked for the RNC and the Republican Senate Committee and the Republican Congressional Committee. He even advised the Swift boat guys in 2004. And now, of course, Ben Ginsberg is the lawyer for the Mitt Romney campaign. So Ben Ginsberg is one of those guys you have never heard of, but for whom you still might want to set a Google alert. He's like a Zelig in an elephant suit. When big, important things are going on in the Republican Party, he's usually there on the ground. Where's Ben Ginsberg today? Today he was at a Rules Committee meeting in Tampa, trying to prevent the Republican Party from ever again having the Ron Paul problem that they had this year. This year, even though Ron Paul did not win any state primaries or caucuses, Ron Paul supporters used the party political process to win delegates from multiple states for Ron Paul anyway. There are almost 200 Ron Paul delegates at the convention this year because of that, even though he didn't win any states. But yeah, that is probably never happening again, because Ben Ginsberg just pushed through a new rule that basically says when a candidate wins a Republican Party primary or caucus, they get the corresponding number of delegates, period, full stop, end of story. Republicans also moved up the day that Mr. Romney will technically be crowned the Republican nominee. That happens at the roll call, and that was supposed to happen on Wednesday, when it would have been broadcast on the networks live. They've now moved it to Monday instead, when there will be no live network coverage, which takes care of one little optics problem they were worried they might have. As the New York Times put it, some supporters of Mr. Paul have been pushing to make their voices heard during the roll call vote. Several supporters have signaled their interest in making their admiration for Ron Paul known on the convention floor. Well, now, yeah, after these changes, they can get those yayas out on the convention floor, but not when the network TV cameras are there to show it. Thanks for playing, Ron Paul supporters. The Republican Party is still trying to wish you out of existence. You know, even if the networks aren't there on Monday, we will be. That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow night. And now it is time for the premiere of Mitt Romney, The Making of a Candidate. Have a great time not being in prison tonight. Stay tuned for this. Good night.
I think the aid is all worthless. It doesn't do any good for most of the people. You take money from poor people in this country and you end up giving it to rich people in poor countries. And they're used as weapons of war, so you accomplish nothing. We should export maybe some principles about free markets and sound money, and maybe they could produce some of their own wealth. But this whole idea of talking about the endless wars and the endless foreign aid, it seems like nobody cares about the budget. I mean, we're in big trouble, and nobody wants to cut anything. So if you're going to keep sending foreign aid overseas and these endless wars that you don't have to declare and go into Libya without even consulting with the Congress, the biggest threat to our national security is our financial condition. And this is just aggravating it.
Governor Romney.
Congressman Paul, what they're doing is cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget. They're cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget, which just happens to equal the $1 trillion they're putting into Obamacare. And so what you have is a president that has a priority of spending us into bankruptcy, but he's not just spending us into bankruptcy, he's spending the money foolishly. We need to protect America and protect our troops and our military and stop the idea of Obamacare. Right. That's the best way to save money, not the military.
Right. But hold on one second, because Ron Paul wants to respond to that point.
Well, they're not cutting anything out of anything. All this talk is just talk. Believe me. They're nibbling away at baseline budgeting. It's automatic increases. There's nothing cut against the military, and the people on the Hill are nearly hysterical because the budget isn't going up as rapidly as they wanted to. It's a road to disaster. We better wake up.
Oh.
We're back. Libertarian Congressman Ron Paul of Texas has spent decades espousing his views, and once again, he'll do so on the national stage. This morning, today, he announced he's running for president for the third time. He joins us now from New Hampshire. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, Ronald Reagan ran 3 times. Maybe this will be the one for you. But here, this has been a sticking point about how far you go with your libertarianism, sir. Here you were talking about heroin use last week on Fox News. Let's watch your question and answer to you.
Are you suggesting that heroin and prostitution are an exercise of liberty?
Well, you know, I probably never used those words. You put those words someplace. But, yes, in essence, if I leave it to the states, it's going to be up to the states. Up until this past century, you know, for over 100 years they were legal. What you're inferring is, you know what, if we legalized heroin tomorrow, everybody's going to use heroin. How many people here would use heroin if it was legal? I bet nobody would put to hand, oh, yeah, I need the government to take care of me. I don't want to use heroin, so I need these laws.
Well, your people out there in the crowd certainly agree with that. But let me ask you, as a citizen of Texas, if that came up for a vote, if you had a vote on the issue as a citizen supporting a candidate or whatever, do you think the state of Texas should legalize heroin and prostitution?
I think that under the right circumstances, we should legalize freedom, and that is part of it. As long as people don't force things on other people, I don't feel threatened by that. It's sort of like legalizing gambling. I don't gamble and I don't get involved, but I'm not going to take that right away from you. So all these things are things that you can do in a free society. But today I gave a long talk about this very issue, and I emphasized the fact that the reason I argue for freedom of choice is I want people to decide what medications they can take, and whether they want alternative medicine, whether they can drink raw milk, whether they can use marijuana when they're sick, and that we shouldn't depend on the government for that guidance. But if you do need guidance with children, if a law is there to try to protect children, that's a different story. But it's the concept of legalizing freedom, making choices by individuals and assuming responsibility for themselves. And even though that was a special statement about how many people would do it if it were legalized, you know, most people aren't going to use heroin. More people use heroin because it's illegal. So making it illegal doesn't help that much. Kids can go out and get marijuana easier than they can get beer. So beer can be regulated in a way that they prevent the kids from getting it. Most of our history, our early history, there were no laws against this. It didn't happen
I guess
until
I have to get down to the question. Do you think you're saying, I'm not sure what you're saying, if a mother who has children to be responsible for, a husband, a father, should they be allowed to be heroin addicts? Because this is how far you're going with your libertarianism, it seems, even now.
Well, the whole thing is addictions are a disease. We don't put alcoholics in prison, so I'm just against the war on drugs the way it's happening. There's other ways you can handle it. But if you treat it like a crime and throw these kids, like we had for decades, in prison because they smoked a little bit of marijuana and they come out violent criminals, that war on drugs has failed. And believe me, the people know that. And so I'm against the federal war on drugs. I'm not pro-drug usage. As a matter of fact, I'm very critical of the carelessness of doctors who give way too many pain pills. There's more people addicted to prescription drugs than they are to illegal drugs.
Okay, just to finish this conversation on this point, you have complete freedom to answer this question, yes or no. Should we legalize heroin?
I want to legalize freedom and let the states deal with the regulations.
Let me ask you about how far you would go in terms of the Constitution, because I understand libertarianism. Most of us as young people were very much enraptured with it as kids, in our teens, I think. Hillary Clinton was a go-worker. Well, I'll tell you, because the idea of total freedom doesn't seem to work. Let me ask you, the 64 Civil Rights Bill. The 64 Civil Rights Bill, do you think an employer, a guy who runs his shop down in Texas or anywhere, has a right to say, if you're black, you don't come in my store?
Well,
that was the libertarian right before 64. Was it the better society?
I believe that property rights should be protected. Your right to be on TV is protected by property rights because somebody owns that station. I can't walk into your station. So right of freedom of speech is protected by property. The right of your church is protected by property. So people should honor and protect it. This gimmick, Chris, it's off the wall when you say, I'm for property rights and states' rights, therefore I'm a racist. I mean, that's just outlandish. Because wait, Chris. People who have, let's say that law was there and you could do that. Who's going to do it? What idiot?
Everybody was in the South.
What idiot
I saw the white-only signs driving through the South in college. Of course they did it. You remember them doing it.
Yeah, but I also know that the Jim Crow laws were illegal, and we got rid of them under that same law, and that's all.
Right,
good.
well, you would have voted against that law.
Pardon me?
You would have voted against that law. You wouldn't have voted for the 64 Civil Rights Bill.
I wouldn't vote against getting rid of the Jim Crow laws.
But you would have voted for the... Oh, come on. Honestly, Congressman, you were not for the 64 Civil Rights Bill.
Because of the property rights element, not because he got rid of the Jim Crow law.
The guy who owns a bar says no blacks allowed, and you say that's fine.
No, Chris, you're demagoguing it now.
No,
you know
I'm asking
that
a question. What is the answer? What's your answer?
You know, segregation was created by government laws. Slavery was created by government laws. Segregation, let me go. The segregation in the military by government laws. So what we want to do as libertarians is repeal all those laws and honor and respect people with freedom of choice. But for you to imply that a property rights person is endorsing that stuff, you don't understand that there would be 0 signs up today saying something like that, and if they did, they would be an idiot and they would be out of business. So I think you're just getting overboard in order to try to turn it around and try to accuse somebody being a racist.
I'm not calling anybody racist. I'm saying the laws are racist.
That's what you're implying.
Let me ask you this. I once knew a laundromat when I was in the Peace Corps training in Louisiana, in Baker, Louisiana. A laundromat had this sign on in glaze, whites only on the laundromat, just to use the laundromat machines. This was a local shop saying no blacks allowed. You say that should be legal.
That's ancient history. That's ancient history. That's over and done with.
Because
and it was promoted by the segregation on buses and all was done by laws. So it was a culture. That's over and done with, Chris. Why do you want to go back to ancient days?
Because you want to come back.
It's past.
You're running for
president.
Because you're running for president as a libertarian, believing we don't need laws to protect people.
And you're reading much more into it, and you're trying to imply certain beliefs that I don't have.
I think you're libertarian.
You're wrong. I think you're
a total libertarian.
Doing it deliberately.
I think you're a total libertarian. I think that's what's appealing about you, sir. I think people like you.
Listen,
you know why they like you? They want to live in a simpler society.
Total libertarian is believing in liberty versus being a totalitarian. So if you want the opposite, just look around. That's what we have. We have a totalitarian world. That's what most of history's been about. Totalitarianism, dictatorship. We've only had a small taste of freedom of choice and the principle of private property and contract rights, and we're blowing it. So this whole thing that we're going to give up on that. What we're doing is trying to emphasize that something good and wonderful comes from freedom and freedom of choice, and that we should not say this, that liberty is disgusting, as you implied, and totalitarian should be the way we run our country.
Questions.
I think that's absurd.
We've had a long history of government involvement with Medicare, Social Security, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and I think you're saying we would have been better off without all that.
I think we'd be better off if we had freedom and not government control of our lives, our personal lives, and our and policing the world and running the economy.
Well,
because we're facing. Hey, Chris, let me finish. We're facing a calamity because of that. We have a financial crisis. We have a crisis in the foreign policy. We're losing thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands are coming back sick because of our foreign policy. And we're at a point where we cannot sustain this, and we're on the verge of runaway inflation because there's too much acceptance of big government. That is the problem. No matter how noble you try to make it, your good intentions will not compensate for the mistakes that people make that want to run our lives and run the economy and reject the principle of private property and making up our own decisions for ourselves.
Thank you, Congressman. I love your foreign policy. Don't get me wrong. I love your foreign policy. Thank you very much.
Well, you'll come around, Chris. You're coming along. You will. Once you'll see and you'll put it all together, it's all one package. Personal liberty and foreign policy and economic liberty is one package.
You have a great following out there. Good luck in the campaigning for president. You started today. I know it's growing, and you may well win this thing. Just remember, Ronald Reagan got it on the 3rd try. Thank you, Congressman Ron Paul of Texas.
All right.
Well, that's what hardball is all about. I tell you, that's what we do here. Up next, from Ron Paul to his son, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. What do you hear he has to say? He says if you believe in universal health care, then you believe in slavery. That twist of logic coming up in the sideshow. You're watching Hardball, only on MSNBC. Next up, Rand Paul goes off the deep end. This week, the Tea Party senator from Kentucky said, if you believe in universal health care, you then believe in slavery, too. Got to hear it to believe it.
With regard to the idea of whether or not you have a right to health care, you have to realize what that implies. It's not an abstraction. I'm a physician. That means you have a right to come to my house and conscript me. It means you believe in slavery. It means that you're going to enslave not only me, but the janitor at my hospital, the person who cleans my office, the assistants who work in my office, the nurses. Basically, once you imply a belief in a right to someone's services, do you have a right to plumbing? Do you have a right to water? Do you have a right to food? You're basically saying that you believe in slavery.
Well, the problem with that connection, even if you believe there's a general right to health care in this country, you're not saying we require any individual doctor to come provide you with that service. It's interesting stuff, though. I know the philosophy behind this guy.
Attention to why we're here on this campus and what many students are very interested in, and that is the fact that, Congressman Paul, right now we are looking at student loan debt that is near $1 trillion. Americans owe more on student loans right now than credit cards, and the average debt for a college senior right now is over $25,000. It's obviously a very hot topic right here on this campus and with students across the country. Just listen to what they have to say.
Tuition rates have increased roughly 3 times that of inflation over the last 3 decades.
More students have to take out loans or forego college.
My generation is graduating with student debt levels at an unprecedented level.
So, Congressman Paul, you've already talked about the fact that you want to get rid of the Department of Education. You've said that you want to get rid of federal student loans. So how would you make college more accessible, more affordable for these students and students around the country?
Well, I think you proved that the policy of student loans is a total failure. I mean, $1 trillion of debt, and it's going to be dumped on the taxpayer. And what have they gotten? A poor education, and costs have skyrocketed because of inflation, and they don't have jobs. There's nothing more dramatically failing than that program. So, no, there's no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to be dealing with education. We should get rid of the loan programs. We should get rid of the Department of Education and give tax credits if you have to help people. But the inflation is the big problem. 3 times the rate that the government admits inflation is, and that is natural and normal. When governments inflate the currency, it goes in the areas that the government gets involved in. Housing, high prices go up. Stock market, skyrocketing prices. Medical care, skyrocketing. Education.
How do they pay for it? How do they now pay for college if they're not?
The way you pay for cell phones and computers. You have the marketplace there. There's competition. Quality goes up, the price goes down. Can you imagine what it would have been like if the Department of Homeland Security was in charge of finding one person or one company to make the cell phones? I mean, it would have been a total disaster. So when the government gets involved in the delivery of any service, whether it's education, medical care, or housing, they cause higher prices, lower quality, create bubbles, and they give us this mess that we're in. That's why we have to eventually we have to wise up and look at where the bubbles come from. It's from the Federal Reserve, and we should start by auditing the Fed, and then we should end the Fed.
Thank you, Congressman. Speaker Gingrich, Congressman Paul just talked about a bubble.
While at the End the Fed rally outside the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas, Texas, we spoke with Ron Paul's brother, Wayne Paul.
1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed, floor of the House, where 3 members of Congress were on the floor. At that time, they only needed a majority of votes to pass it. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. 20 years later, 1933, under Roosevelt, the United States was declared bankrupt. And in 1933, the Federal Reserve Private Bank says, okay, USA, what are you going to pledge as collateral on the debt you owe me? What happened by 1936? Does anybody know? We instituted Social Security system, and you and I and our children and our children's children were pledged as collateral on the debt of our government to the Federal Reserve. Wow. And that's where we're at today. It took 20 years to make this country bankrupt, and since then, our government has operated under emergency powers of our government. It is not the president that makes the decision in this country. It's the Secretary of Treasury who turns around and is put in there by the Federal Reserve to manage the bankruptcy. We've been in bankruptcy ever since. So to print $700 billion and to give it away, how do they get away with it? The manager of the bankruptcy is told by the Federal Reserve this is the way to go. That's where we're at today.
Yes, we should point out, Congressman Ron Paul now has a huge amount of sponsors for a bill in the House of Representatives to abolish the private Federal Reserve crime syndicate.
In 1913, the money power of the country was taken away from the people. By constitutional privilege, it belongs with the Congress, but it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, but yet it has the power to determine the direction of use of money in our economy. If we could take that power back and put the Federal Reserve under Treasury, we start to be in a position of being able to control monetary policy on behalf of the United States people.
The Federal Reserve is totally private, and Alan Greenspan 2 weeks ago on PBS on Lair NewsHour said on record that they are above the law, the Congress, the President, everyone. No court can do anything. We run America.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. So long as that is in place and there is no evidence that the administration or the Congress or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relationships are don't frankly matter.
Notice what Greenspan is saying. Greenspan is saying the Federal Reserve is beyond the law. And in reality, they are in practice beyond the law. Nobody, as far as I know, has ever audited the Federal Reserve. One of the first things we ought to do when we nationalize the Fed is go in there and find out the audit. Who stole money? Who engaged in corruption? There's a whole series of people going back to Volcker, to Greenspan, to Bernanke, and so forth.
Think of the arrogance of private group of banks that have bankrupted the nation by design so they can repo the country. A private group of banks that loaned us our own money back are telling us they're above the law. You are not above the law, criminals. No one is above the law. No one is above the law, and the private Federal Reserve sure as hell isn't either.
Since the founding of the Federal Reserve back under Woodrow Wilson, the Federal Reserve has struck out 3 times. They didn't stop the crash of 1929. They didn't stop the banking panic of 1932, 1933. And now they are the cause of the derivatives crisis because they're the ones who inflicted derivatives on the world with Alan Greenspan.
Instead of our economy being about goods and services and real products and manufacturing, it's all about these guys, the private Federal Reserve that masquerades as a government entity who controls the issuance of currency and credit. They're the ones that have cut off the liquidity in the market. They told us have a debt-based economy. Then they cut it off once they get us under their thumb and implode the economy so they can consolidate it. And that's what they're doing right now. I mean, it's in their own documents. It's in their own statements. They claim, give us unlimited power, give us trillions of dollars with the Baker bailout bill that's already $5 trillion, not $850 billion as they say. And we'll get the economy going, but they're hoarding the money and buying up other banks that aren't part of the Federal Reserve, buying up insurance companies, buying up roads, infrastructures, media empires, defense contractors. What the banks do is they implode an economy by cutting off credit, and then once things really fall to a low, and they know the low because then they buy everything up and start then putting more money back into the economy, and then they build it back up. So they build us up and then shear us, build us up and shear us. And they're getting ready. All over the world, they're always shearing some country, imploding it. Comes out in their own IMF and World Bank documents. That's just the foreign arm of the same cartel.
And these are the people who claim to be the saviors of the economy, the people who have created every important crisis in the past 100 years, the Federal Reserve. So it's illegal, it's unconstitutional, and it's a failure. And I think the failure is what everybody can see right now.
Yeah, what they do is they make you think Clinton's evil in running things. Then, oh, Bush will save us. And then, oh, Bush was evil. Now we'll be saved by Barack Obama, but he's just a puppet. But as we get deeper into this phase, when they implode the economy, they have all the money and all the control, but they also like to pose as the savior. So Obama is meant to be the savior during the Depression, and he'll save us with a 1 million person, he said, is bigger than our military, domestic spy force, a 3 million person environmental spy force. So giving people these jobs to be government bureaucrats and spies to go out and manage the other 290-something million Americans. And so this is classical fascism. The communists also do it. Any vertically integrated command and control authoritarian system does this. So they're openly following what the same group of banks did in Germany, Russia. It's in the Communist Manifesto to have a private central bank, because the private central bankers actually wrote the ideas that they had Marx and Engels put out. People go, well, why would the banks want communism? It doesn't exist. They rape us, they consolidate us, they put us into work brigades, they make us slaves, and they say it's a people's paradise. Look at it, boy, you're really doing good. And then they transfer all the wealth of the nation offshore. The globalists are outside all the nations. That gives them safety, and they play countries off against each other. And so that's what we're facing and dealing with. And so they're bringing in classical, hardcore tyranny in the U.S., but we have the internet. We've grown our numbers. The alternative media has exploded. That's why they're trying to move in to shut down and regulate and tax the web, but it's too late for them. They're playing in the 19th century, 20th century rules. It's the 21st century, the century of resistance to tyranny. And so it's going to be one hell of a fight with the people and free humanity on one side and the New World Order on the other. And every one of you out there counts, needs to be involved in this fight like nothing you've been involved with before, because this is life and death. Everything depends on exposing these people. Everything depends on showing the people that this is the New World Order, this is the criminals. We're dealing with the king rats here, the people that are carrying out tyranny worldwide. And either they fall or we fall. Either worldwide darkness and a new age of tyranny and oppression and with a scientific overlay, or a new age of liberty and freedom and a new renaissance. The choice is the people's out there. Okay, we can tell you what's going on. You can check it out for yourself and find out it's true. But don't wait. Investigate now. Get involved now. Go out there and reach out now. We don't have time. If you're looking for the solution, look in the mirror. Look right into the mirror, because you out there, men, women, old, young, black, white, doesn't matter. It's going to be up to you if they win or if liberty succeeds and the people have a chance of having any future. These are cold-blooded eugenicists. These are cold-blooded people who think they're God, think that they're our masters, that think that we're animals. These are the guys that funded Lenin and Stalin and Hitler and Mao. These are the guys, it's all on record, that bankroll this stuff. They are hardcore vicious, and they must be resisted.
Anyone that suggests that Iran is not a threat to this country, or is not a threat to stability in the Middle East, is obviously not seeing the world very clearly. He sees it exactly the way that Barack Obama sees it, that we have to go around and apologize for the fact that we've gone out and exerted our influence to create freedom around the world. I don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for the Iranian people being free for a long time, and now they're under a malocracy that tramples the rights of women, tramples the rights of gays, tramples the rights of people all throughout their society, and is the greatest supporter of terrorism in the Middle East and around the world, and is setting up training camps and is working with Venezuela and other countries in south of our border to threaten us. Iran is a country that must be confronted. I was in front of this curve. I authored the Iran Freedom Support Act back in 2004. It was blocked by Joe Biden, nonetheless, and Barack Obama once. We got it passed. And I can tell you, if Rick Santorum and when Rick Santorum is president, Iran will not get a nuclear weapon, because the world as we know it will be no more.
Congressman Paul, 30 seconds.
You've heard the war propaganda that is liable to lead us into the sixth war, and I worry about that position. Iran is a threat because they have some militants there. But believe me, they're all around the world, and they're all around the world, and they're not a whole lot different than others. Iran does not have an air force that can come here. They can't even make enough gasoline for themselves. And here we are, building this case out. Please. They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars.
When we come back, we'll try to get a hold of things.
Reform.
I want to change subjects now because foreign policy issue. Speaker Gingrich caused something of a stir overnight in the Middle East with comments he made in an interview with the Jewish channel in which he called the Palestinians an invented people. And I just wondered, Congressman Paul, if I can start with you. Do you agree with that characterization that the Palestinians are an invented people?
No, I don't agree with that, and that's just stirring up trouble. And I believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy. I don't think we should get in the middle of these squabbles, but to go out of our way to say that so-and-so is not a real people. Technically and historically, yes, under the Ottoman Empire, the Palestinians didn't have a state, but neither did Israel have a state then, too. But this is how we get involved in so many messes, and I think it just fails on the side of practicing a little bit of diplomacy, getting ourselves into trouble, mentioning things that are unnecessary. The people in those regions should be dealing with these problems. We shouldn't be dealing with these things, but historically, under the Ottoman Empire, that is technically correct. But to make these decisions and deciding what the settlement is going to be should be the people that are involved. This idea that we can be the policemen of the world and settle all these disputes, I mean, soon we'll have to quit because we're flat out broke, but we cannot continue to get into these issues like this and getting ourselves into more trouble.
Speaker Gingrich, as I said, this has caused quite.
What does this question evoke? How much does it matter to have had personal experience?
Well, I feel very fortunate because although I was raised in a family that was rather poor, but I didn't even know it. It was during the Depression and World War II, and we didn't have very much, and I worked my way through college, and that was a natural instinct because that's what you were supposed to do. But I finally did a little bit better in medical school because I had my wife work our way through medical school. So that worked out a little bit better. But middle class is suffering, but not only because we bail out the rich and dump on the poor and they lose their jobs and they lose their houses, but there's a characteristic about monetary policy. When a country destroys its currency, it transfers wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And this is what you're seeing today, the elimination of the middle class. And it's going to get a lot worse unless we address the subject overspending, overborrowing, and printing too much money and understanding the business cycle.
Senator Santorum.
I can say that I agree.
Well, it happened. We believed in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. We believed in a man who'd always kept his word and had a perfect constitutional voting record, Ron Paul. It didn't matter that the establishment said he couldn't win. It didn't matter that they demonized him when they were forced to report on him. Ron Paul went from second to first place in Iowa. He went from third place to first place in New Hampshire. All over the country, Ron Paul is now coming up first or second. He is the front runner, and he's the only one who isn't a carbon taxing, open border promoting, Obama socialist healthcare loving globalist like Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich, and others, or for that matter, Rick Perry. And so the Republican establishment is in panic mode. The system isn't going to get its new world order, its control freak nanny state, if somebody like Ron Paul wins the Republican nomination. They're already in panic mode over the fact that he's so prominent in the race when they desperately tried to censor him and black him out of the debates. People are talking about liberty. They're talking about freedom. They're talking about not giving tens of trillions in corporate bailouts to offshore globalist banks. Ron Paul is helping to bring sanity back to this country. He's saying torturing people is wrong, that the CIA being caught bringing drugs into this country is wrong. And he's being called a kook, a nut, a lunatic by an establishment that is out of bullets, that is losing all of its credibility, that people aren't listening to anymore. The system noted that they pulled out all the stops on the Republican and Democratic system from both sides to attack Rand Paul in Kentucky last year, and that only backfired on them because the system is so discredited. So now they're really resorting to a new level of dirty tricks. We demanded that Ron Paul run for office. We made the point that even if you lose, we win because you inject real issues. We demanded that Ron Paul run because resistance is victory. Even if he doesn't win the nomination or win the presidency, we're in the game. We're pointing out real issues that shows that we have a two-party dictatorship in this country. And now that Ron Paul's in there, we've got to defend him. We've got to stand with him. The traitorous sellout Republican Party that's in league with the Democratic traitors is desperate. They're in panic mode. And so they're taking an old trick but adding something new to it. They're saying if Iowans vote for Ron Paul, they're basically wasting their vote. But more than that, they are discrediting Iowa, and that if Ron Paul wins Iowa, that Ron Paul discredits the caucus system itself and how presidential nominees are picked. Now, Ron Paul's not doing that. Ron Paul's supporters, who are the voters in the caucus, they're not the people that are doing that. It's the governor attacking the electoral process. It's the governor bringing into question the election system. It's the governor assaulting the voters, but they spin it that it's Ron Paul. You know, if Ron Paul standing for election happens to win, he discredits Iowa, so don't waste your vote on him. It is just an incredibly dirty trick, but I believe will backfire if we get the word out and if you get this video and the articles we've written about it at Infowars.com out to everybody. I mean, look at the mind control. Look at how brazen and naked this is. The governor, Politico, and other operatives come out in droves with a talking point that if Ron Paul wins, forget it. Look at number 2, Mitt Romney. And that Ron Paul's discrediting the process when they're the ones trying to discredit the process and telling voters what they believe in and what they stand for isn't valuable. They've already told you how to think, saying you can't vote for Ron Paul, he won't win. Now they say if he wins, it's a loss for Iowa and that they'll be discredited and the Iowa caucus won't be the important kickoff of the election it's been for many decades. That is mind control. That's them saying, hey, you're trendy. You're into whatever we tell you. So do what you're told and shut up and vote for Mr. Carbon Taxes, Mr. Abortion, Mr. Open Borders, Mr. Author of Obamacare, Mitt Romney. Or if you don't like him, go for Mr. Same as Romney, Newt Gingrich. You can't have Ron Paul. The corrupt establishment that's taken this country over is freaking out and really showing their hand right now and showing that they think if they tell you that our state will be embarrassed if you do this, that you're so weak-minded that you'll go along with that. I want everybody to get this special news report from InfoWars Nightly News that I'm breaking down right now and get it out to everybody you know because they are scared of him. I mean, here's one of the headlines out of Politico. Will Ron Paul kill the caucuses? And it goes on to say that he's a threat to the state's cherished kickoff status. And if he wins, they're discredited. They think you're a bunch of mindless people who just do whatever you think is popular. It's all of this peer pressure-driven, advertisement-based bull that has taken us from the most wealthy and most respected country in the world to one of the most indebted and universally reviled and hated because we've allowed criminals to take over our system, because we sit there and let the men in the nice suits tell us how to vote. It is incredible. So get these articles and this video out to everyone you know and point out the arrogance and hubris of the Republican Party that is so scared of Ron Paul. As I told Politico and other publications when Rand Paul was running, I said, don't you get it? The more you demonize him, the more dirt you try to dig up, the more crap you make up, the higher his poll numbers go. And they're doing the same thing with Ron Paul. Now, in closing, the anonymous group says they're going to hack things because they're mad at Ron Paul. That's the feds. But the feds are going to come in and try to oversee it now. So, of course, they can then claim that the hack threw confusion into the vote. So they say Ron Paul won, but is it true? They're doing anything they can to engage in mind control and manipulation. But if you're aware of it, and if you understand the type of staged events they pull off, their power over all of us is broken. Break the trance. Now, continuing with tonight's news report, I want to get into the nanny state because just today I saw this stack of articles in front of me. Every day I see these type of reports, and I've almost become numb to it. We cannot let ourselves become numb to it. Remember when they said that they were going to have trash inspectors, that it wasn't going to be associated with fines a few years ago, even though they'd done that in Europe? And even though the company setting it up said that that was part of the model. Look at this headline out of My Fox. Public Works defends fine for not recycling cat litter, $2,000 fine. And what are they doing? They're digging through your trash. Continuing, here is another one. This is out of Queens. Trash can tickets in Queens. They say a little known law that you have to put your trash cans out at an exact time. Well, residents found that if they put their trash can out 30 minutes early before it's supposed to be out, you put it out when the man says so, they're given a $100 fine. But if you do it a second time, well, it goes up to $1,000. So you'll put your trash can out when your government master says so. Here's another one. Regulators seek ban of cell phone use in cars, even hands-free. Wall Street Journal. Hands-free is completely safe. But they're saying they're going to track with government systems your cell phone use. The police are going to have scanners. And so if they find if your cell phone's in use in the car, why, then you're going to get a big fine. It's all about revenue generation. But remember, as they raise more and more taxes and more revenue, notice everything's falling apart, less and less services, because we're going into austerity. Under the globalist model, they want to destroy us economically. It's in the IMF and World Bank documents that came out in the BBC in 2002. They want to destroy the economy, and they're shutting it down. And no amount of new taxes will ever pay off all these fake debts. It's designed to shut down the economy. It's a monopoly implosion program, just like we see happening in Europe right now. Now, finally, I have this article that a listener mailed us, and you can look at it online and pull it up as well from the Boston newspapers. Lynn woman charged over feeding ducks at park. AP reports an 80-year-old Lynn woman was criminally charged Wednesday because she refuses to stop feeding flocks of ducks and geese that officials, not servants, but officials, say are littering a pond and park with waste. And again, they've always got good reasons for this. Hey, when a cop pulled me over and wanted to check my window tint, I looked at him and I said, you know, MF Global has stolen billions of people's private accounts and won't get in trouble. I said, the government puts sodium fluoride in the water they admit gives you a 7-fold increase in cancer. I said, the government's getting rid of laws so they can put military on the streets. There's all these huge crimes, but all you're allowed to do is run around and raise revenue. And that's what's disgusting about this. This whole system, this whole nanny state is about making us feel like we're criminals. It's about teaching us to line up and be groped by the TSA in airports and now on highways and watch our children be groped. It's about the general public who's not criminal learning how to be a perp, learning how to be treated like a criminal, learning that we've got something to prove to the state and all of us are suspects until proven slaves, not guilty until proven innocent. We've gone beyond guilty until proven innocent. We are slaves here to be taught that we're guilty. We're being taught and conditioned that we're scum and trash and are always guilty and that only government can be trusted. Only government is our loving mommy and daddy. The globalist, the social engineers, the control freaks, in their own admissions, want to implode society to make us all dependent on them so they can socially engineer us in their image. They must be met with truth. They must be met with courage. They must be faced down because they know that we're waking up. And so they're accelerating their program. And incredible tyranny is now upon us. Last night, we broke the report that not only did Halliburton subsidiary KBR get the master contract to now prepare the subcontractors to man the camps. They've built them. Now they're getting ready to man them. But now we've gotten the master federal bid when they put it out two companies and have direct links to it on homelandsecurity.gov website. And still, the mainstream media won't touch this. And they're not going to come grab you and take you to a camp and blow your head off day one. No. They're going to sell the camps. We know this from the Model States Health Emergency Powers Act, the Emergency Centers Establishment Act, that it's going to be for the collapse for poor people. And then there'll be security problems, and there'll be brigs where the bad people go. That's in all these documents, and they've built them all over the country. People say, why would they want to wreck the economy? Don't they want to make money? The elites issue the money. They control unlimited money through Ponzi schemes, but they've got to have tyranny in place to make sure you accept their fraud. That's like asking, why did Kim Jong-il of North Korea, not care about millions of his people starving every few years? It was a form of domination. The sickos that run that country enjoy what they're doing. To people like Hitler and Stalin and Mao, death and destruction is enjoyable because it presses on the nerve of power. They get off on it and get away with it. The old famous founding father Thomas Jefferson quote, evil men and tyrants flourish when good men and women do nothing. So if you want to know the problem, if you want to know why this is all happening, it's because we left the door open. We let the vampires in. Look in the mirror, it's our fault. Sure, psychopaths, control freaks, they're horrible. They are, at the end of the day, the enemy. But we, the people, by leaving the door open, if I let the door open where I live, raccoons will raid my house. It's happened to my parents. That's what raccoons do. You leave your doors open to tyranny, it's going to take over. It's our fault for letting them get rid of the Bill of Rights and Constitution, letting them, by a successive approximation, train us to be slaves. I'm Alex Jones reporting from the front lines of the info war. Let's turn this nanny police state around. Let's let these people know that we're not their prisoners. Let's let the criminals know that they're not going to turn our whole country into a giant, insane...
Number four, we cut federal employment by at least 10% through attrition. And finally, we say to federal employees, you're not going to make more money than the people in the private sector who are paying for you. We link their compensation. Time.
Congressman Paul. On foreign aid, that should be the easiest thing to cut. It's not authorized in the Constitution that we can take money from you and give it to particular countries around the world. To me, foreign aid is taking money from poor people in this country and giving it to rich people in poor countries, and it becomes weapons of war, essentially. No matter how well motivated it is.
Congressman Paul, would you cut aid to Israel?
I would cut all foreign aid. I would treat everybody equally and fairly. And I don't think aid to Israel actually helps them. I think it teaches them to be dependent. We're on a bankruptcy course, and look at what's the result of all that foreign aid we gave to Egypt. Their dictator that we pumped up, we spent all these billions of dollars, and now there's a more hostile regime in Egypt, and that's what's happening all around Israel. That foreign aid makes Israel dependent on us. It softens them for their own economy, and they should have their sovereignty back. They should be able to deal with their neighbors at their own will.
Should we cut foreign aid to Israel?
No, we should not be cutting foreign aid to Israel. Israel is our greatest ally.
Jerry Saab has the next question.
Congressman Paul, South Carolina has 7 major military bases and thousands of people employed in the defense industry. But you want to make major cuts in defense spending, several $100 billion in the coming years, that inevitably would cost South Carolina jobs. What do you say to people in this state who worry that your military plans would hurt the national security and cost South Carolina jobs?
I would say your question suggests you're very confused about my position. I want to cut money, overseas money. That's what I want to do. I want to cut military money. I don't want to cut defense money. I want to bring the troops home. I'd probably have more bases here at home. We were closing them down in the 1990s and building them overseas. That's how we got into trouble. So we would save a lot more money and have a stronger national defense, and that's what we should do. But to say that we would be weaker is absolutely wrong, because, and another important thing you should consider is the fact that the military is behind me more than the others. I get twice as much money
from the active military duties than all the other candidates put together. So they're saying that I'm on the right track. They're sick and tired of those wars. They're sick and tired of the nation building and the policing activity. But to say that we would have less money for defense, we actually have more money. And if I may, I'd like to go back to the international financial thing.
So, Congressman, just to be clear, your plan calls for freezing defense spending at 2006 levels, which is well below where we are today.
You still don't understand.
What's he missing, Congressman?
You don't understand there's a difference between military spending and defense spending. Just because you spend $1 billion on an embassy in Baghdad, bigger than the Vatican, you consider that defense spending. I consider that waste. So now, if you want to, a little while ago we were talking about, funding the unemployed. Of course, that should be privatized, and I don't support it. But I don't support cutting that off like that. I'd cut some of this military spending, like Eisenhower advised us. Watch out for the military-industrial complex. Defend this country. We have to have a strong national defense, but we don't get strength by diluting ourselves in 900 bases, 130 countries. That is where the problem is. But you need to understand that there's a difference between just military spending and defense spending, just to spend money. We understand this domestically. If you spend more money domestically, we know it's wrong, but we're supposed to spend more money, and that's conservative. I've never quite understood this. We're supposed to be conservative, spend less money.
I'd like to ask a question.
Paul, Republican of Texas, he ran for president this past election. He's here to react to what we've just heard. Concerning health care, Mr. Moore believes that universal health care is everyone's right, threatens that the Democrats will lose seats if they don't support it. What's your stand on this, Congressman?
I think it's a fallacy to say that people have a right to somebody else's services. Now, you have a right to your life, and you have a right to your liberty, and you have a right to earn a living. You ought to have a right to keep it, but you have a responsibility to take care of yourselves. But you don't have a right to get something from government, because government has nothing, so government has to take it from somebody and give it to you. So it's a failed policy. It is, a form of socialism, and socialism doesn't work. It leads to a big kind of problem.
Congressman, if you have no money and you fall down on the street with a heart attack, you have no money, no one should take care of you? The government should not provide an ambulance or treat you?
No, but we don't have a history in this country of that happening, even before government started managing health care. I practiced medicine in both circumstances. In the early 60s, we didn't have managed care, and I worked in a Catholic hospital. I made $3 an hour, and nobody was ever turned away. And there were many, many church hospitals, and you had Shriner hospitals, and a lot of free care was given. Today, even with managed care, they complain about, somebody doesn't have health insurance and somebody's going to die because they don't have health insurance. But really, people don't get turned away. I mean, accidents happen. Man's imperfect. But for the most part, anybody, including anybody illegal, can go to the emergency room, and they always get taken care of. They just don't get thrown out in the street.
Are you saying you like the current system?
No, I probably dislike it as much as Michael Moore does. But he's complaining about it being part of capitalism. It has nothing to do with capitalism. This is corporatism. The corporations, I agree with them. Corporations run things. The drug companies lobby us. The insurance companies lobby us. And the hospital management companies lobby us. The AMA lobby us. And that's all managed care. And we have a system where money and bigness influences the government. But that's corporatism. That's not capitalism. What we want are free markets.
How do you change that?
Allow free markets to work. There's an example of free markets, and I might have even heard it on CNN today, of the example of somebody that was going to be charged $100,000 for surgery, and they went to Singapore and got it for $25,000, and the main reason they gave why they could afford to do it was that they didn't have horrendous malpractice payments to make, and there was a market. There was a market mechanism. So the patients are leaving this country. They're going to India. But that's the market working. So we have put our charity hospitals out of business. At the same time, because of inflation and management and all the mischief of government, we have pushed these prices up. Pumping money into a system doesn't improve quality. It increases prices. Look at our educational system. We pump in money, prices go up. The quality of education go up, and the quality of medicine has not gone up by just pumping more money into it.
Lyndon Johnson once said the probable answer is that a government's going to have to be half capitalistic and half socialistic. You have to have some. Social Security is socialism. You have to take care of those who don't have. Pure capitalism can't work. Would you agree with that?
No, really. It's sort of like I practiced OBGYN. I never could tell my patient they had a touch of pregnancy. And, you know, you're either pregnant or you're not. You either have government intervention messing up the markets or you don't. You either believe in freedom and believe in voluntary choices. I mean, just look at this disaster with the swine flu vaccine. They took over the whole project. We pump in billions of dollars, and they come up with shortages. The distribution is lousy, and they're talking about forcing people to take them in places like New York. And nobody's even proved that it's necessary yet. We have still a lot of deaths from ordinary flu, far surpassing swine flu. So, man, central economic planning in anything fails, and especially in medicine it fails.
But, Congressman, everyone online getting it who's getting it free is not standing there complaining about government involvement.
Yeah, but I have a daughter that practices medicine, and I was talking to her about it, and she says, "Oh yeah, Dad, I can give shots and it's for free, but we don't have anything." So when something is free and you don't have it, it's irrelevant. And some of the people who don't want it are being forced to take it. We have lost our faith and confidence in understanding how free markets work. We turned it upside down by saying anytime corporations get benefits, we call it capitalism and freedom. And it's corporatism. It's the military-industrial complex. It's all the special interests. And this is where Michael Moore gets it all wrong. He believes diligently in free markets because he believes in the First Amendment. He believes in making films. He doesn't believe in prior restraints. So why should he condemn capitalism? Right. Because he's condemning corporatism. I condemn it too. Special privileges of corporation is a big problem.
Maybe it's semantics. More with Congressman Paul right after the break. Don't go away.
I think capitalism, as it's defined now, has not only failed. Well, it hasn't really failed the rich. It's actually helped them. The wealthiest 1% now have more financial wealth than the bottom 95% combined. So it's a really good system for a few people.
Hi, Ron, do you disagree with that statistic that Michael Moore just pointed out?
No, and I complain about it as much as he does, but I think I understand it differently, because when a country embarks on deficit financing and inflationism, you wipe out the middle class, and wealth is transferred from the middle class and the poor to the rich. And when we get into trouble, then the corporations, once again, who are in control, they come for their bailout, and then they get the benefits, and the little people don't. So yes, there is some truth to that, but it's the failure of the free market to exist. That is our problem. It isn't the fact that we don't have enough government. We have way too much government. The government created this monster. If he doesn't like what we have, he has to look at what we've been doing for 30 or 40 years. It's called interventionism. It's called Keynesianism. It's called inflationism. It's called big government. That's the problem.
Here's what Michael Moore said about Afghanistan. I'll ask Congressman Paul what he thinks about the war there. Watch.
Al-Qaeda has left there. They booked out of the neighborhood, Larry. They're long gone, okay? They're in Pakistan. They're in parts of Africa. They're elsewhere in the Middle East. You know, they're here in the U.S. I mean, they're a real internet operation now, as Matthew Hull, this State Department individual who resigned last month over the Afghanistan policy. You should go online and read his letter of resignation. You'll see he explains it very clearly that if we want to deal with Al-Qaeda, the last place we need to be right now is in Afghanistan. That's just a crazy making place. It's unwinnable. It's immoral. It's illegal. It's wrong. And what is our CIA doing, paying the brother of the president of Afghanistan, who's involved in this opium trade that's funding the Taliban? I mean, when does this stop?
Congressman, you're a strong critic of Iraq. Are you a critic of the Afghanistan policy as well?
Yeah, I sure am. My position is we shouldn't have gone in, and we should just come home. But earlier on, Michael was saying that he was hopeful and sympathetic to what Obama was doing. I don't think he's quite willing to criticize Obama like Bush, but I am. And yes, there have been a token effort of bringing some troops home from Iraq. Iraq is a mess, but at the same time, we're sending in contractors to replace the troops, paying them a lot more money, subsidizing the military-industrial complex, and Obama ought to be condemned for that. You can't just pick out. So anytime you support Obama in any of those policies, they're bombing Pakistan right now, killing civilians, and we're on the verge now of attacking or at least putting on more sanctions on Iran, which will lead to hostilities if we're not careful, because we're talking about the Iranians just like we used to talk about the Iraqis, putting on tougher and tougher sanctions, making the people suffer, hoping the people are going to overthrow their leaders, not realizing the tougher the sanctions you put on the people, the more you drive them into supporting their leaders.
So you would get out of Afghanistan and Iraq post-haste? I would.
And my saying during the campaign was, we just marched in, we can just march home, there's nothing good can come of it. And it's an undeclared war. It's an immoral war. We don't have any money. The longer we're there, the worse it's going to get. And we just need to come home. We can't nation build. And besides, I will win this argument because we are bankrupt and we can't afford it. So it's going to end badly if we don't come to our senses and just say, let's quit this militarism around the world. I mean, we're in 130 countries and 700 bases around the world, and we cannot sustain these. And it's pumped up by both the left and the right in the Congress. Oh, we can't do away with this weapon. It will be bad for jobs. There's conservative Keynesianism and liberal Keynesianism, always government management, which always fails and gives us the financial crisis that we're in.
The always thoughtful Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. Thanks. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Larry.
Always good having you with us.
We interrupt this Tampa coronation for a bit of a gyration. That fellow there, Ron Paul, someone had thrown a lay on him to say he is greeted here favorably as a rock star here, most definitely. Ron Paul telling me he likes this ticket. That doesn't mean he is supporting this ticket. Ron Paul, minutes ago.
I didn't know what to expect. I knew we had a few friends here, but I was surprised with the enthusiasm and very pleased.
Who got you the Hawaiian way? Who did that?
Somebody.
Someone in the Hawaii delegation.
Yeah.
You are, backing the ticket, but you're not wholeheartedly enthusiastic about it. Is that about right?
Well, that's about it. I haven't endorsed the ticket, and I endorse the principles I've been talking about for a long time, a lot of times on your show, and you know basically what that is. I'm endorsing, peace and prosperity and individual liberty, the Constitution, and I'm more intense on that than I am on the politics of it. So in a way, as I drift away from the political action, I might even feel more comfortable. There's some things in politics that aren't a whole lot of fun. There's a lot of infighting. I never enjoy that. There's a little bit of that going on now, but I would just assume talk about business problems, economic problems, and the business cycle. Those are the things that really stir my interest.
You prefaced your remarks, Congressman, saying you're not quite on board with this ticket then. Does it mean you could leave this convention not supporting it?
No, I'm not intending to endorse anybody.
Does you have any horse in this race you like?
You mean in the total race? Well,
Barack Obama, Mitt Romney.
I'm not at this moment. I have no plans to endorse anybody, and I think most people realize that.
But you're going to vote.
I will probably vote. I've done that in the past.
Would you err more on the side to Mitt Romney or not?
On certain issues. But just remember.
But is there a possibility you could vote for Barack Obama?
Not too likely.
Okay. Is there a possibility you could vote for the Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson?
Well, there's always possibilities of everything, but I haven't made up my mind. Put me down as undecided. But let me just tell you what happened in '76. Ford was president, and I was a big Reagan supporter. Went to the convention, but back then I wasn't. Nobody really cared. But I never endorsed the ticket, and it was a non-event. I just didn't endorse it because Reagan was my guy.
Well, you're a much bigger deal now. You're a national figure.
Yeah, but that's only because you get me on your show all the time.
But in all seriousness, Congressman, the candidates, Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan himself, in just an interview yesterday, was talking about this notion that, yeah, those enthusiastic backers of yours will rally around, as you will rally around this ticket. They're confident you will and they will. Are they overconfident? Are they mistakenly confident?
They might be jumping the gun a bit.
What do you want to hear out of them?
Because I'm not a block. I don't own my delegates. I'm a little bit different. I don't have, all right, I have these delegates. I'm going to release them. I can't release anybody. I don't own anything. They're going to do what they want to do. And if I do something that they don't think is consistent, I'll lose credibility and they won't do what I tell them.
Well, are your backers telling you, sir?
I think
don't sign on board with this ticket?
I think they're very independent. I think some are in that position. Some might, and some might go to different parties. But they're individuals. And when they ask me what to do, I said, do what you want to do. You know, I don't see this as I see what I do as more of an intellectual movement, and we talk about revolution because we need a revolutionary change in our ideas. We just can't go along with the status quo. And when you come down to monetary policy and foreign policy and spending and debt, the tradition, the Republicans and Democrats haven't had a whole lot of difference. You know,
in
fact,
your criticism of Paul Ryan when he was picked was not that he cuts too much, but that he doesn't cut nearly enough.
Yeah, matter of fact, you interviewed me on the day we voted.
And your point is well taken because over 10 years, even with the Ryan plan, that does shave $5 trillion off spending over 10 years, but we still have more spending than we do this year.
Yeah, but it was 30 years to get to a balanced budget. So,
and you argue that's way too long.
Way too long. And there were no cuts. It was, one point that I try to talk about is baseline budgeting. And that should appeal to logic. Why should you have a baseline that's going up steadily, and anything you cut from the baseline is a cut? So they get nearly hysterical if you increase a $100 billion budget to 150.
In other words, curb the growth.
Yeah,
that's not cutting.
No,
right.
It's not.
No, you're right about
all.
that. You're right. But is this party, by the argument for Mitt Romney, Congressman, picking Paul Ryan was to show that he had that conservative gravitas, that anti-spending gravitas. You don't buy that, it sounds like.
Not according to what my speech was on the floor about the Ryan budget, because I voted against it because it didn't really cut anything. But the Democrats fall into the trap. The Democrats become the group that solidifies his reputation by saying, oh, my Lord, look at what this Ryan does. You know, the Ryan is slashing the budget. Conservatives say, hey, that's our guy. But the Democrats give him his reputation, but he's only talking about cutting proposed increases. They're not real cuts. And, of course, I'm interested in less militarism. I don't think we should fight undeclared war. So there's places where I'm convinced that if anybody's sincere about cutting, they have to talk about baseline budgeting. They have to be willing to cut domestic and foreign expenditures. Otherwise, they don't think this is very serious. And you know that I believe it's very serious because I believe that we're going to get into a much worse crisis than we had in 2008. It's approaching quickly, and it's a spending problem. And if we get into the same situation as Greece, it's a much bigger deal because we are the biggest economy and we have the reserve currency. That's what we should be talking about. But because they don't do this cutting and they're not serious, they either don't understand or they're just willing to delay it or figuring, oh, I can't win if I actually cut something. You know, everybody yells and screams. You know, if you cut one weapon system, oh, you're going to destroy the troops.
Well, how do you feel about these sequestration cuts, these automatic cuts? Many in your party have argued the defense cuts are draconian, they're too severe. Where do you stand on that?
I think that's silly talk because there are no real cuts. There's just cuts in the proposed increases, and that's where the problem is. So they fight, they delay it, they get the deficit level increased, the debt level increased, and they agree to sequester funds. And then guess who wants to remove that? Liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans.
They both agree. They didn't like the rules. Do you think we have this debt clock running in here, Congress? And I think that is, in all reality, a difference to you and the issue that you've made it. But, you know, $16 trillion is a lot of money. And do you think we'll ever get that paid off?
Oh, absolutely not. There's not a prayer. Governments never pay off the debt, but they liquidate the debt. You don't pay it off. You don't earn it. Like if you and I get into trouble.
But is there a way to boom your way out of it? Can you grow your way out of it?
No, not at this
The Romney
level.
ticket believes with tax cuts and the like, you can boom your way out.
But you can inflate your way out of it, destroy the value of the currency. If we owe $16 trillion, if you destroy, hit 50% price inflation, your dollar lost 50%, you only owe $1 trillion.
Could you imagine if interest rates were higher, how much that debt would be?
And interest rates will go higher, and they're destined to go higher. Otherwise, we don't ever have to go to work again, because we issue the reserve currency of the world. They're still selling us stuff, and they still, when there's a little shake in market, people still go to our treasury bills. That can't last forever.
No, it can't last forever. Finally, your thought here at this convention, where whatever the agreements or disagreements, there's a lot of people who think the world of you here, but you don't have a huge speaking role here. And I'm wondering whether they're kind of soft pedaling you.
I don't know what you call it. No, I don't have. It's not that I don't have a huge speaking role. I don't have a speaking role, but they're anxious. I think they're really anxious.
Well, they
to
count
have
the
our
stuff
voters.
you do off-site. That's what you're doing off-site. But you don't feel you don't feel you've been treated well by the Romney campaign?
I don't worry too much about that and characterize it a certain way. Of course, my supporters think they treat us atrociously, and I sort of get it out of my system because we had a grand rally on Sunday night.
But would you be angrier, Congressman, if not for your son and thinking about his future, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and that maybe the better part of valor is to swallow your angst or pride, whatever you want to call it, so that he could carry the torch?
Well, it might sound I'm cold and callous, but guess what? About the time he was 16, I sort of turned him loose.
And away he went.
And he's on his own. So I can't bestow anything on him, and he's doing a pretty good job, and he will not do things just as I have done it, and he has a pretty good reputation already. So there will be disagreements on strategies. So I think that's pretty normal and understood.
You know, Congressman, as the business nerd at Fox, what I've always appreciated about you covering your speeches and your primaries and caucuses, you're the only guy on the planet who could talk about the Federal Reserve and money supply and velocity of currencies and get standing ovations from young people.
I love it.
If I could do that, my ratings would be like Jay Leno's.
I'll tell you what I enjoyed on the write-ups on the rally we had the other night is they talked just about what you said, and he said, what is amazing about Ron Paul, he did this talk for an hour and 15 minutes. I can't believe anybody would sit and listen to that. But they said he never mentioned the president's name or Romney's name once.
That's right.
And I never, that wasn't a plan, but that's just the way my mind works, because like they want me, used to always say, attack Bernanke, attack Bernanke.
Right.
No, Bernanke isn't the issue. It is the issue of fiat money and the monetary policy.
Well, maybe your next career is beckoning, a financial anchor at Fox.
Well, I thought you were going to send me to the Fed.
Congressman, thank you very, very much.
There
Very
you
good
go.
seeing
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
I don't have any proof of my theories.
What's your theory?
Because sometimes we get thousands of people like this, and we'll take them to the polling booth, and we won't win the caucus. So, a lot of our supporters are very suspicious about it. But the straw votes have been very confusing. I mean, you've probably read in the paper about what happened up in Maine. I mean, there's just a lot of confusion. They said, well, let's have a recount. They said, well, we can't have a recount. They just write these numbers down on pieces of paper and we throw them away afterwards. So it's that kind of stuff that makes you suspicious, because, quite frankly, I don't think the other candidates get the crowd like this. And we get them constantly, thousands of people coming out. And, you would get the perception that we would be getting a lot more votes. But we're going to get to delegates, and the delegate hunt is on, and that is a lot more difficult to, get careless with the numbers, because each individual knows what their responsibility is, and they work through the caucus system, and so far we're getting good news on that.
Dr. Paul, what was your reaction to the outcome in Kansas today? The caucus outcome, Senator Central winning the caucus.
Nobody even gave me the numbers. I didn't know that. I wonder why we did. That reminds me of a picture I just looked at, and I had 4,000 people and he had 150, so who knows?
Well, when you say suspicion, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
No, I can't, because I don't know anything. It's just sort of,
of an instinct and hearsay stories, verbal stories that you hear, and the kind of things that we heard about up in Maine.
But you do expect the thousands who are coming out to support you, you do expect them to go out and to vote for you?
Sure, we do.
So
they don't come here. Why is this enthusiasm if they're not going to vote?
Senator Santorum won all the counties down here in the primary, and it looks like he had a pretty good crowd this morning. Are you concerned about his performance here?
No, I'm concerned.
I mean, he went everywhere in Missouri.
I'm concerned about our message, our enthusiasm, and the delegates that we're going to continue to get. Some of the states where we came in third, we're going to have the majority of the delegates. I think I was just told a little while ago that we won the majority of the delegates in Alaska.
Okay.
So it's the delegate count that counts.
What are your hopes for the Missouri caucus? What are your hopes for the caucus next week here?
Get a lot of delegates.
Dr. Paul, the past couple of days, you've brought up the fact that the Republican Party should be known as the Goldman Sachs Party. Do you believe that'll be an issue if Mitt Romney is the eventual candidate that the Obama administration will use?
Well, only I can do that because Obama is tied into Goldman Sachs too. So, no, I think it's a big issue. To me, I use that symbolic of Wall Street, bailing out Wall Street, and the other candidates have had different positions than I've had because I want zero bailouts. Okay, thanks, guys. Very good.
Thank you, Dr.
Congressman.
I'm going to take some pictures of some of that.
It's interesting you have appeared to have annoyed Bill O'Reilly over and over too, because we've had this conversation before. He went on the air a few weeks ago talking about how you can't have real money. You have to have paper money. That's it was not in the Constitution. That's easily refuted, and you easily refuted that. But apparently he's annoyed at you now for another reason. He was taken after you the other day, and here's what he said.
Bill, there is an orchestrated campaign to hurt Killing Lincoln on Amazon.com. Who's doing that? The occupiers? There's some far-left involvement, but the primary people dishonestly sliming the book are Ron Paul supporters. Amazon and Congressman Paul are aware of the situation, and I want to thank all of you who have actually read Killing Lincoln.
All right, so that's the idea. Apparently up on the Amazon website where people give comments about Bill O'Reilly's book, he says your people, the Ron Paul people, are trash-talking Bill O'Reilly.
I never knew I had people. I was in control of people. I have control of myself and my ideas, and hopefully people will endorse those ideas. But one of the things I don't want to control are other people. I don't know all the details, the technical problem that Bill's having with Amazon, but I guess he'll have to work that out. I have no idea what is occurring with the interference in him selling his books.
But you'll have to, admit is not the right word, but you'll have to acknowledge that you have an extraordinarily faithful, aggressive, and dedicated core of supporters. I mean, they'd crawl over broken glass for you.
Yes, and I turn that around because I know my limitations, and I feel good that they place confidence in me. But what I'm convinced of is they are dedicated for the things I'm talking about. You know, they understand what I'm saying about personal liberty, about a different foreign policy, about the Federal Reserve, sound money, limited government, and cutting spending, following the Constitution. That's what they tell me when I talk to them. And I talk to literally hundreds, if not thousands of them when I go to the campuses. And that is what they're interested in. And I think they do want to associate with a personality. But I consider that very secondary to their enthusiasm for the issues I've been talking about.
This is Patrick. Good morning, Patrick. You're talking with Congressman Ron Paul.
Yeah, Dr. Paul, I just wanted to tell you I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have been following the nomination process closely, and I've been listening to the debates. And I want to tell you that I think that unquestionably you have the most integrity of anyone who has thrown their hat in the ring. And I enjoy listening to you. You make me think. You have me thinking about my political position. I admire your respect for the Constitution, and not just when it is popular with, quote-unquote Tea Party folks, but maybe when it's unpopular with the more conservative folks, with respect to some of the positions that you take. But
Thank you, Patrick. I am just about out of time. Congressman Ron Paul, respond.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to let you know that you're very welcome at some of our rallies, and we always get some Democrats, a lot of independents. So I think the message that we are delivering is available for everybody.
Thank you, Governor Romney. That raises the question, if you were President of the United States, would you need to go to Congress to get authorization to take military action against Iran's nuclear facilities?
You sit down with your attorneys and tell you what you have to do, but obviously the President of the United States has to do what's in the best interest of the United States to protect us against a potential threat. The President did that as he was planning on moving into Iraq and received the authorization of Congress.
Did he need it?
We're going to let the lawyers sort out what he needed to do and what he didn't need to do, but certainly what you want to do is to have the agreement of all the people in leadership of our government, as well as our friends around the world, where those circumstances are available. But the key thing here is to make sure that we don't have to use military action against Iran. That's what you hope to be able to do, and that's why we're going to have to put a lot tougher sanctions on Iran, economic sanctions, credit sanctions. We're also going to have to get serious about treating Ahmadinejad like the rogue and the buffoon that he is. And it was outrageous for the United Nations to invite him to come to this country. It was outrageous for Columbia to invite him to speak at their university. This is a person denied the Holocaust, a person who has spoken about genocide, is seeking the means to carry it out, and it is unacceptable to this country to allow that individual to have the control of launching a nuclear weapon. And so we will take the action necessary to keep that from happening. And I think each person on the stage, but certainly in my case, I would make sure we would take the action necessary to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
I guess I want to get to the basic constitutional view here of you gentlemen. Same question down the line, gentlemen. It's so important. Congressman Paul, do you believe the President needs authorization of Congress to attack strategic targets in Iran, nuclear facilities?
Absolutely. This idea of going and talking to attorneys totally baffles me. Why don't we just open up the Constitution and read it? You're not allowed to go to war without a declaration of war. Now, as far as fleeting enemies go, yes, if there's an imminent attack on us, we've never had that happen in 220 years. The thought that the Iranians could pose an imminent attack on the United States is preposterous. There's no way. This is just war propaganda, continued war propaganda, preparing this nation to go to war and spread this war not only in Iraq but into Iran unconstitutionally. It is a road to disaster for us as a nation. It's a road to our financial disaster if we don't read the Constitution once in a while.
Around the horn, Congressman. Governor.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. Sam Stein is still with us, along with Mike Barnacle in New York. And joining us here on set in Washington, we have Republican Congressman from Texas and Republican presidential candidate Representative Ron Paul. And we have the host of MSNBC's Now with Alex Wagner. Alex Wagner, very good to have you with us. My goodness. First of all, Congressman Paul, are you still campaigning, or what are we doing?
Always campaigning.
You're always campaigning.
I've been campaigning for 30-some years. 34 years.
What else would you do?
I would not know what to do if I couldn't campaign for my favorite subject, and that is personal liberty.
Yes.
That
okay.
is my goal.
That's fair. So let's look at the state of the campaign. I want to ask you about Mitt Romney. You're not ready to endorse him, obviously.
No.
Okay. Can I ask you a question about him?
Well, I would think that's what I'm here for.
Okay. Has Mitt Romney shown himself to be someone who has clear convictions on the key issues that are important to the Republican Party?
You're asking me whether he does?
Yes, and whether he's shown himself to be someone who has clear convictions.
The Republican Party of the last several decades, I would say he has core convictions, but I just disagree with them.
Okay.
Because the core convictions aren't what I think we sometimes pretend we believe in and what we have believed in the past. So therefore, those core convictions are something I'd like to change. I'd like to change those convictions of the Republican Party because there were times when they had much better positions, and there's no reason why we can't restore those and improve upon them.
So the Republican Party has lost its way. Would you agree with, for example, what Jeb Bush said recently in critiquing your party?
Well, I think it has lost its way. I think a long time ago. I can't see the difference. Foreign policy. We get Obama, we get George Bush.
what significant change are there? They're both very militaristic, interventionist, pro-war. When it comes to the Fed, do they really want to challenge the Fed and the printing of money and financing debt? No. Do the Republicans really stop welfare expansion? No. Do they really cut back and balance the budget? No. They usually introduced bigger budgets, generally over the years, whether it was Reagan or Bush. They spent a lot of money. So I would say the people have been misled into thinking that, there's a big contest going on out there. I think that personality-wise and power struggle, there are real contests going. But when it comes to the philosophy of government, there's not enough difference for me.
Sam Stein.
All right, so the conventional wisdom is that Rick Santorum won the Iowa caucus, and then we find out this past week that your campaign actually gets 23 of the state's 28 delegates to the convention. And you've scored similar wins like that in Nevada, Louisiana, Maine, other states. What are you going to do with all these delegates? What's the end game here?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have quite enough, to take over the convention.
Okay, that was the ultimate goal.
But
what's
I
the
think
goal?
that, and under the rules, they're going to restrain us because as of now, I'm not sure whether I will have a public presence. But we will have a president, the organization, because even those many who have been nominated and elected as delegates and will be obligated to vote for Romney are really our supporters. So that means the atmosphere, what's going on, platform fights, and the excitement will be with our group.
Have you asked, or have you been asked by Mitt Romney to have a speaking portion at the convention?
No, I have not asked specifically, and he hasn't invited me to. We under the rule, if we'd have had 5 clear-cut wins, in the state, they would have been obligated to allow my name be nominated and then give a speech, which would be my speech, and a 15-minute speech. And that, right now, because of the questionable way who gets seated, and sometimes these delegations would win them, and in Nevada, there's controversy.
One last second question. How are you hoping to influence the party platform? What specifically do you want in the language that would placate your hordes of followers?
Precisely, definitely follow the Constitution. Whether it's on declaration of war, whether it has to do with monetary policy, whether it has to do with doing things that are not unauthorized, like the welfare state. We want to challenge the whole thing.
Okay, Alex Wagner now.
Dr. Paul, I want to go back to something that Mika said. You're often seen as an outlier for the Republican Party. Do you think the tent is big enough right now? And if Mitt Romney loses in November, what do you think the repercussions are for the GOP?
Well, I always think that no matter what comes of it, there should be a positive outcome for it.
Do you think there will be?
I know the word outlier is a common term, and I'm not criticizing you, but really the problem is the Republican Party has become the outlier for the cause of liberty, and what they pretend. I want to work on the platform, but we know platforms don't change people's attitudes. That's what we want to do: get attention to change in the attitude so that we who are perceived as outliers become the insiders. And that's what's happening. That's what people aren't quite aware of, because we're winning state delegations, state chairman, and small offices, anywhere from city councils to county commissioners. That's what's happening. All you have to do, and the subject hasn't come up yet, look at the next generation. I mean, there is so much excitement out there, and although we have the greatest influence on young people, this movement, which is they think that's all. No, we have a lot of people who are joining who aren't under 30. But the big deal is that the next generation are sick and tired of what they're getting, and they're looking for something. And what we're offering seems to have great appeal to the young people, because they know they're getting a bad deal, they're getting bankruptcy, they're getting war, they're getting just all the problems dumped on them.
Dr. Paul, I'm going to throw a couple of things out there. Alex, you take a question out of this. I'm going to end on reading you a part of Joe's piece from Politico. But I understand your campaign plans to hold its own event prior to the convention. So the question is, are you helping or hurting the party by separating yourself so close to the convention? But also, here's what Joe writes, and it plays into the issue of conviction in the leaders in the Republican Party and his worry about not only the Republican presidential field that went through the primary process, but those who didn't join in to try and run for president. He voted for you. Why I voted for Ron Paul, Politico. While Romney was distancing himself from Ronald Reagan, Ron Paul was fighting with Republicans to balance the budget for the first time in a generation. While Santorum was supporting an unprecedented expansion of entitlement spending, Paul was warning of a great recession that would be caused by government interference in the housing market. And while Gingrich was talking about how he would build up the federal government to push his conservative agenda, Congressman Paul spent all his waking hours focused on dismembering that big government beast. We can't think of anyone who ran in the Republican field or even in the Senate and in Congress who has really, really strict convictions that they've stood by. Maybe one or two people, Alex.
No, I mean, I think the slogan widely acknowledges consistency. Thy name is Paul, and that consistency is why I've been to, on the campaign trail. I've been to your rallies. I've seen those crowds where it's folks in their 70s, it's folks in their 80s, it's
really young people too.
It's
and a lot of Canadians. I don't know why. That's what I found on the campaign trail.
The message of liberty is universal. We get a lot of messages from almost every country in the world.
Here.
But I mean, the standard bearer for the party right now is someone who has been attacked roundly for having no consistency in any of his platform positions. So it does, I mean, when you look at the Republican Party, it's not just Democrats who say this. There is a certain sense that it is in crisis. And I guess the question is, depending on what happens in the fall in November, is there going to be time where the Republican Party spends some time on the psychiatrist's couch and thinks, okay, we need to sort of circle the wagons and figure out what we really believe in?
Well, our goal, if we're not going to be the nominee, if I'm not going to be the nominee, the goal is to show that there's a political benefit toward accepting some of the views that we have, or all the views that we have, that there's a benefit. Because most people aren't driven by philosophy in government, believe it or not. They are not. That is not their goal. Their goal is to be in office. Mm-hmm. But there needs to be an attempt to get people to believe in something. And because that's what the people want, and sometimes they need it more than others. Right now, in the last 5 years, why there's been so much, such a great growth in our philosophy is of the need. Wars are endless. People are tired of them. The money is there. The debt is there. The crisis had come. So therefore, the door is wide open. So I believe we're actually doing a favor for the Republican Party if they would look to us for guidance and to realize that if they would accept some of these things, they might have an easier time winning, rather than just saying capitulate, conform, don't even have a discussion. Why should there not be a discussion at a convention? You and I, everybody pays for this. $18 million to pay for this, and you're not allowed to have a discussion? The Democrats, they don't even have a contest. $18 million just for this PR stunt.
A lot of videos.
All I want to do, if I don't get a speech on the floor in the convention, all I want to do is have a little meeting and say, hey, look, we have numbers, we have people, we have enthusiasm, we believe in something. Why don't you pay a little attention? And actually, I think they are. They don't know quite how to handle it. They're not quite ready to say, oh, yeah, I guess it's time we get out of Afghanistan. They're not ready for that. But this is what the people want.
Mike Barnicle in New York has a question for you, Congressman Paul. Mike.
Congressman, a few moments ago I heard you talk about there is a next generation out there, another generation that have grown tired of carrying the burden built up by past generations. And you mentioned exploding budgets, foreign wars, and things like that. And I've heard you speak several times, and when in your condemnation of the welfare state, it would seem to me that you are headed in the direction of eliminating programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Am I wrong on that?
Well, sort of, because there's a good time sequence. As adamant as I am about the purity of a philosophy, I'm also very pragmatic when it comes, I want to get rid of the Fed, but I also don't want to get rid of the Fed tomorrow. What I want to do is have competition with the Fed and let the Fed self-destruct. And when it comes to welfare, matter of fact, I'm probably the best protector of Social Security and some of these programs for child health care and elderly health care, because we can't afford it. We're going bust, and it's all going to collapse collapse. You have Obamacare is totally destructive to the medical care system. I'm saying I want to cut $1 trillion out of the budget, but a lot of it comes from overseas funding and war, and I say this is the only way we can preserve some of these programs and work our way out of it. I want young people to opt out of Social Security, but my goal isn't to cut. I think this is where the Republicans make a mistake. They're seen as cutting food stamps and increasing the military budget. I think it's bad politics, and so in my more pragmatic stance on how we get to the place where I want to go, actually, I'm probably offering a program where some of these programs that we have taught people to be so dependent on, I would probably preserve them longer than others because we're going to lose them because of the bankruptcy that is coming.
Oh, okay. And now I've seen the composition of many of your rallies, and there are many, many, many young people who attend your rallies. Do you feel, in speaking to this next generation that you just spoke of, do you feel any obligation to talk to them, perhaps instruct them about the fact that there has always been a social contract among Americans from one generation to another to help those who need help the most?
Yeah, but not through government. The best way you can help people is have freedom and free markets, incentives, production, sound money. So my goal in my program is the most humanitarian. You're insinuating that there's a socialism type or welfareism that is promised one generation to the next. That's not in the Constitution. That's sort of a 20th century concoction of welfare transfer, through force of government. But if you care about people, you have to or sound money, personal liberty, incentives to get ahead, peace and trade. These are the things that will take care of people. And we have accepted this sort of social contract you talk about for the last 100 years. And look at where we are. Look at what's happened in the last 20 years. Look at what's happened since the year 2000. Look at what's happened in the last 5 years. It's downhill. So what do we get? For education for kids, they're graduating, they have more debt, no education, and no jobs. That's what your social contract is giving you.
A bit of a personal question then. Are you on Social Security? Do you get Social Security checks?
I do.
Well, you just told younger generations that they should wean themselves off this social contract.
That is true.
But you haven't done it yourself.
The Social Security, just like I said that I would preserve the Social Security the best I can, but we want to get off. But this is one program we were supposed to be paying into an insurance program.
I understand that.
Yeah, so it's
don't you
different.
Think you could have set a good example for the future generations? I mean, I'm not saying you're not the wealthiest man in Congress, I know that, but you have enough means to take care of yourself in retirement. Shouldn't you have provided an example?
You know that
not to be all sanctimonious about it, but I just want to.
You're not being sanctimonious, you're just being a little sanctimonious.
A little bit, but I'm just curious. Couldn't you have set an example?
No, I think that I think the programs are so designed, just as I use the post office too. I use government highways. I do that too. I use the banks. I use the Federal Reserve System. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't work to remove this. In the same way, on Social Security, I am trying to make a transition. Yeah. If I were 20 years old and offered that chance, I'd jump at it. And the young people jump at it because they know that this is not solvent. Yeah. So I personally don't see any consistency in that because we were supposed to have money there, and we had this, contract. This is not like signing up for food stamps. This is signing up to get. I still pay Social Security. I pay more into it than I get out.
Oh, that doesn't make sense. But there you go, Congressman Paul. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you, Mr. Sanctimonious.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Alex Wagner, stay with us.
I'm Congressman Ron Paul from Texas. I'm the champion of liberty. I am the only one that has offered a balanced budget in a sincere method. And also, I present the case for a free society as being the best defense for peace and prosperity.
Congressman Paul, you called his plan dangerous today.
Oh, it is, because it raises revenues, and the worst part about it is it's regressive. A lot of people aren't paying any taxes, and I like that. I don't think that we should even things up by raising taxes. So it is a regressive tax, so it's very, very dangerous in that thing, and it will raise more revenues. But the gentleman asked the question, he didn't even ask what we're talking about. He asked the question, what are you going to replace the income tax with? And I say nothing. That's what we should replace it with. But I do want to make a point that spending is a tax. As soon as the government spend money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money. And then when prices go up, like today, the wholesale price index went up 7% rate. And if you look at the free market, the prices are going up 9 and 10%. So that is the tax. So spending is the tax. That is the reason I offered the program to cut $1 trillion out of the first year budget that I offer.
Congressman Paul, there are some Latino voters who believe that some of these strong anti-immigration laws, anti-illegal immigration laws, are actually anti-Latino laws. What do you say to them?
Well, I think some people do believe that. I think offense is symbolic of that, and I can understand why somebody might look at that. But when we approach this immigration problem, we should look at the incentives, and that are the mandates from the federal government saying that you must educate and must give them free education. You have to remove these incentives, but I don't think the answer is a fence whatsoever. But in order to attract Latino votes, I think, you know, too long, this country has always put people in groups. They penalize people because they're in groups, and then they reward people because they're in groups. But following up on what Newt was saying, we need a healthy economy. We wouldn't be talking about this. We need to see everybody as an individual. And to me, seeing everybody as an individual means their liberties are protected as individuals, and they are treated that way, and they're never penalized that way. So if you have a free and prosperous society, all of a sudden this group mentality melts away. As long as there's no abuse, one place where there's still a lot of discrimination in this country is in our court systems, and I think the minorities come up with a shorthand in our court system.
Congressman Paul, you were referenced directly, 30 seconds.
Well, I would like to explain that rights don't come in bunches. Rights come as individuals. They come from a God, and they come as each individual has a right to life and liberty. But I might add about the border control and the Latino vote is we lack resources there. I think we should have more border guards on and a more orderly transition and run it much better. But where are our resources? You know, we worry more about the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We need to bring the guard units home and the units back here so we can have more personnel on our border.
My question for you is, do you support opening the National Nuclear Repository at Yucca Mountain?
Congressman Paul, you oppose this?
Yes, I've opposed this. We've had votes in the Congress. There was a time when I voted with two other individuals, the two congressmen from Nevada. And I approach it from a states' rights position. What right does 49 states have to punish one state and say, we're going to put our garbage in your state? I think that's wrong. But I think it's very serious. But quite frankly, the government shouldn't be in the business of subsidizing any form of energy, and nuclear energy, I think, is a good source of energy, but they still get subsidies. Then they assume this responsibility. Then we as politicians and the bureaucrats get involved in this, and then we get involved with which state's going to get stuck with the garbage. So I would say the more the free market handles this, and the more you deal with property rights and no subsidies to any form of energy, the easier this problem would be solved.
Governor Romney, where do you stand on this?
Congressman Paul was right on that. I don't always agree with him, but I do on that.
Congressman Paul, you're correct when it comes to allowing the states to compete with each other. That is the answer to this.
Congressman Paul, you've been critical of Governor Romney for holding fundraisers with Wall Streeters. Do you think he understands what the protest is about? Do you understand?
Well, I think Mr. Kane has blamed the victims. There's a lot of people that are victims of this business cycle. We can't blame the victims, but we also have to point. I'd go to Washington as well as Wall Street, but I'd go over to the Federal Reserve. They create the financial bubbles, and you have to understand that. You can't solve these problems if you don't know where these bubbles come from. But then when the bailout came, and supported by both parties, you have to realize, 08, Republicans were still in charge. So the bailouts came from both parties. Guess who they bailed out? The big corporations, the people who were ripping off the people in the derivatives market. And they said, oh, the world's going to come to an end unless we bail out all the banks. So the banks were involved, and the Federal Reserve was involved. But who got stuck? The middle class got stuck. They got stuck. They lost their jobs, and they lost their houses. If you had to give money out, you should have given it to the people who were losing their mortgages, not to the banks.
Mr. Kane, do you want to respond? He referenced you, so if you want to respond, you have 30 seconds.
All I want to say is that
Representative Paul is partly right, but he's mixing problems here. It's more than one problem. Look, the people, the bank, yes, the banks and the businesses on Wall Street, yes. The way that was administered was not right.
Yes, the argument is the program was okay, but it was mismanaged. But I work on the assumption that government's not very capable of managing almost anything, so you shouldn't put that much trust into government. You have to trust the marketplace, and when the government gets involved, they have to deal with fraud. And how many people have gone to jail, either in the government, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, that participated in this, and nobody suffers the consequences. All these investigations, and yet the people who lose their jobs and lose their houses, it's their fault. That's why they're on Wall Street, and we can't blame them. We have to blame the business cycle and the economic policies that led to this disaster.
Congressman Paul, you just proposed eliminating the Departments of Commerce, Education, Energy, Interior, Housing, and Urban Development. You say it'll save $1 trillion in 1 year. You're proposing a 15% cut to the Defense Department. Can you guarantee national security will not be hurt by that?
I think it would be enhanced. I don't want to cut any defense. And you have to get it straight. There's a lot of money spent in the military budget that doesn't do any good for our defense. How does it help us to keep troops in Korea all these years? We're broke. We have to borrow this money. Why are we in Japan? Why do we subsidize Germany? And they subsidize their socialized system over there because we pay for it. We're broke. And this whole thing that this can't be on the table, I'll tell you what, this debt bubble is the thing you better really worry about, because it's imploding on us right now. It's worldwide. We are no more removed from this than the man in the moon. It's going to get much worse. And to cut military spending is a wise thing to do. We would be safer if we weren't in so many places. We have an empire. We can't afford it. The empires always bring great nations down. We spread ourselves too thinly around the world. This is what's happened throughout history, and we're doing it to ourselves. The most recent empire to fail was an empire that went into, of all places, Afghanistan. They went broke. So where are we in Afghanistan? I say it's time to come home. I think we're on economic suicide if we're not even willing to look at some of these overseas expenditures. 150 bases, 900 bases, 150 different countries. We have enough weapons to blow up the world about 20, 25 times. We have more weapons than all the other countries put together, essentially. And we want to spend more and more, and you can't cut a penny? I mean, this is why we're at an impasse. I want to hear somebody up here willing to cut something real. This budget is in bad shape, and the financial calamity is going to be much worse than anybody ever invading this country. Which country? Are they going to invade this country? They can't even shoot a missile at us.
We have a question in the hall that gets to your question. The question in the hall on foreign aid. Yes, ma'am.
The American people are suffering in our country right now. Why do we continue to send foreign aid to other countries when we need all the help we can get for ourselves?
Congressman Paul.
On foreign aid, that should be the easiest thing to cut. It's not authorized in the Constitution that we can take money from you and give it to particular countries around the world. To me, foreign aid is taking money from poor people in this country and giving it to rich people in poor countries, and it becomes weapons of war, essentially. No matter how well motivated it is.
Congressman Paul, would you cut aid to Israel?
I would cut all foreign aid. I would treat everybody equally and fairly. And I don't think aid to Israel actually helps them. I think it teaches them to be dependent. We're on a bankruptcy course, and look at what's the result of all that foreign aid we gave to Egypt. I mean, their dictator that we pumped up, we spent all these billions of dollars, and now there's a more hostile regime in Egypt, and that's what's happening all around Israel. That foreign aid makes Israel dependent on us. It softens them for their own economy, and they should have their sovereignty back. They should be able to deal with their neighbors at their own will.
Should we cut foreign aid to Israel?
No, we should not be cutting foreign aid to Israel. Israel is our greatest ally. The biggest problem is the fact that the president of the...
My approach is an extension of the Reagan approach. Peace through strength, and which is peace through strength and clarity. If we clarify who our friends are, clarify who our enemies are, and stop giving money to our enemies, then we ought to continue to give money to our friends like Israel.
You have 30 seconds, Congressman Paul.
Yes.
I got to go.
Matter of fact, I don't want to make a statement. I want to ask a question. Are you all willing to condemn Ronald Reagan for changing weapons for hostages out of Iran? We all know that was done.
Yeah, what? That's not, Iran was a sovereign country. It was not a terrorist organization, number one.
They were our good friends.
They're not our good friends, but they're a sovereign country, just like the Palestinian Authority is not the good friends of Israel.
He negotiated for hostages.
There's a role, we negotiated with hostages with the Soviet Union. Now, we've negotiated with hostages, depending on the scale, but there's a difference between releasing terrorists from Guantanamo Bay in response to a terrorist demand.
They're all suspect. They're not terrorists. You haven't convicted them of anything.
Than negotiating with other countries where we may have an interest, and that is certainly a proper role for the United States.
We got to take a quick break. I want to thank all the candidates, the GOP candidates tonight.
You didn't get a chance to answer that. You didn't get a chance to answer that. I had the best.
Thank all the candidates for a spirited debate on the stage. We also want to thank our co-sponsors, the Western Republican Leadership Conference.
No problem.